Yeah.
Bom dia a todos, muito obrigada pela presença, estou muito feliz com o número de pessoas que estão aqui hoje, temos mais de 470 pessoas registradas para participar desse evento de lançamento, né, e, enfim, com esses novos tempos, eu acho que tudo isso se torna mais fácil, né, distribuir conteúdo, enfim. Hoje é um dia para se comemorar, né, porque a tradução das normas não foi uma coisa fácil, né, levou um tempo, é uma norma técnica hoje, então não pode ser feito de qualquer jeito. E aí eu queria passar algumas coisinhas para você. Primeiro, eu queria passar os agradecimentos, né, às pessoas da GRI em Amsterdã, os profissionais de GRI Amsterdã que participaram do processo de tradução, né, vejam que não é uma coisa simples, tem um tradutor profissional, né, tem um linguista, tem pessoas que cuidam disso especificamente, e aí eu queria agradecer Tamara Burkamp, Kari Lundelin, e queria agradecer também ao diretor da divisão técnica da GRI, Bastian Buch, por ter tornado isso uma realidade. Então, muito obrigado. Os recursos usados para essa tradução são recursos da própria GRI. Bom, aqui também tem que agradecer aos revisores voluntários, alguns estão no Brasil e outros fora, mas a maioria do Brasil, enfim, João Pedro Dias Fischer, engenheiro de produção nas lojas Renner, Cássio Luiz Velani, da USP, Marina Nunes Páscoa, engenheira ambiental da Transtrejo, em Portugal, Amanda de Andrade, sócia da Andrade Consultores, Roberto Bedqual, fundador e CEO da Getix, Sônia Margarida Xordas, geógrafa e coordenadora de estudos ambientais, e Linda de Oliveira, que é da Centronics, ela é responsável pela comunicação e especialista em economia circular, né, e que participaram desse processo de tradução, fazendo a revisão para ver se todos os termos estavam corretos. Tá? Então, muito obrigada. Queria agradecer também ao Conselho Consultivo da GRI no Brasil, né, na pessoa da Sônia Favaretto, uma pessoa muito especial que deveria estar conosco hoje, mas que com um problema de saúde não pôde participar. Então, mas assim, muito carinho, muito amor para ela e muita gratidão para todos que fazem parte desse Conselho Consultivo no Brasil.
Muito obrigado.
Denis? Você... Bom, a agenda de hoje, né, agora do lançamento, todos nós sabemos que depois nós teremos o Summit da GRI, mas aqui é a agenda de hoje, né? Então, nessa parte da manhã, a gente está fazendo um evento para comemorar o lançamento das normas GRI em português. Então, o primeiro painel é um painel que vai discutir todos esses assuntos que estão muito presentes hoje na nossa realidade, que todo mundo que trabalha com relatório está discutindo harmonização, materialidade, o que é ESG? ESG é igual sustentabilidade? Enfim, essa é uma discussão que vai ser feita por moderada por Asthildur, da GRI, que é a diretora das regiões em Amsterdã, e com 3 mulheres super especialistas em relato de sustentabilidade. Então, nós temos a Judy, que é a Chief Executive da Sancroft, mas ela também é chair do Standard Board, né, Global Sustainability Standard Board. Então, ela faz parte desse comitê técnico da GRI, aliás, ela é chefe desse comitê técnico da GRI. Elaine Cohen, né, que é diretora da Beyond Business e autora dos melhores textos que eu já vi sobre o cenário de reporting, né, e Nelmara Arbex, a quem eu conheço já, acho que mais de uma década, bem mais que uma década, acho que 20 anos mais ou menos que nós nos conhecemos. Ela me contratou no Instituto Etos e depois eu ainda tive a sorte de trabalhar com ela lá na GRI em Amsterdã. Né? Então, muito obrigada a todas. Depois nós vamos ter um break de 15 minutos, né? E aí nós teremos a discussão com Marco van der Rie, da GRI, né, que é sobre a transparência como pilar estratégico para os negócios. Aí nós teremos o embaixador do Reino dos Países Baixos no Brasil, o Marco e a Valéria Café, que é superintendente de vocalização e influência do IBGC, a casa da GRI no Brasil. Então, muito obrigada também a eles. So now the floor is yours, Asthildur.
Okay.
Let's start the webinar.
Thank you so much, Klausia, and congratulations on this event, and of course getting the translation done. We are here to celebrate the launch of the Portuguese translation of the GRI Standards, and it's a much awaited translation because we have thousands and thousands of registered users of the GRI Standards that use the Portuguese, both in Brazil, of course, and in Portugal. So this is a major moment for them to finally be able to have the standards available in their own language. And this is for GRI also a great achievement because we are hereby celebrating the 12th translation of the standards. They exist in, I have the list here for me, it's Arabic, both simplified and traditional Chinese, obviously the English original. We have them in French, German, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So, and now Portuguese. It's a great moment, and yeah, fantastic. And of course, calls for a celebration. And to celebrate, Klausia had this great idea to invite three very powerful and knowledgeable women in the field of sustainability. She already introduced all of them to you. And for the next hour and a half or so, I'm sure we will have a very interesting conversation because these women, they all know a lot and they have opinions, and I'm sure they have a lot to contribute. We will be discussing all the most current topics in our field. For instance, ESG and sustainability. Is there a difference? And the double materiality. What is that? And what about comparability? What about all these other reports and initiatives that are out there? What do we think about that? And so really looking forward to that conversation. And I would like to start by asking the panelists to introduce themselves, and although they've obviously been introduced, but to tell a little bit about your background and your history in the sustainability field, and also reflect a little bit on the sustainability landscape as it is today, and maybe reflect going back to where it all started, you know, back in, was it 89 with the Exxon Valdez and everything that's happened. So how are we doing? Where are we going? But so be still a bit brief, so to leave enough time off for the conversation. But Judy, maybe you would start us off.
Yeah, with pleasure. First of all, I'd like to echo your thanks to Glaucia and to all of her colleagues at the GRI Regional Hub in Brazil for bringing us together today. This is a marvelous opportunity, and I'm so honored to be here on this panel with all of the rest of you, my colleagues, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So at the risk of sort of betraying my age, I've been involved in sustainable business for the whole of my career. It's going back to the early 1990s. I spent 8 years at Ceres, which, as Asthildur kind of alluded to, is the organization that first launched the GRI as a project alongside the UN Environment Program and a technical environmental organization called the TELUS Institute in Boston. And I spent 8 years at Ceres, and I've been for 20 years or so in consulting. Currently, I'm the chief executive of a company called Sancroft based in London, and we work with businesses of all types and sizes to help them implement sustainable business strategies. So as I said, I've been involved with GRI since its inception in 1997. And since then, I've spent time in the Stakeholder Council and then what was called the TAC, and then evolved onto the Global Sustainability Standards Board. I'm currently chair of the GSSB. And I've seen the whole field of sustainability reporting emerge nearly from the ground up, alongside many of you on the panel as well. I think we've been watching the evolution for a number of years now. So the first thing I would say is that we haven't achieved sustainability yet, in case this is news to anyone. We're currently on course for quite dangerous global heating. We're facing the collapse of ecosystems. We run the risk of entrenching a permanent economic underclass worldwide. We're in the midst of a deadly pandemic. So these figures aren't really cause for celebration. But we have seen certain very significant changes. And a major change in recent years has been in corporate attitudes to economic, social, and environmental performance issues and risks as material to their business. This is no longer controversial. It's a mainstream view that's underpinned by experience and evidence. We're still a long way to go in seeing a clear corporate response that commits the business world to act on sustainability. But in some cases, markets and investors are making those decisions for them in their own self-interest. Where I think we still fall short is in connecting up individual institutions, investors, and decision makers to a broader sense of the public interest, which is necessary to make significant progress on sustainability. I'll stop there. Let you bring in another speaker.
Thank you so much, Judy. A lot of interesting points there that we will touch upon in the conversation later. Elaine, maybe you introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, hi everyone, and again, delighted to be here. I said earlier that I would much rather be there in person, but of course, virtual working is how we do it these days. So thank you very much for inviting me to join this panel. My background is with business. I worked for many years for large globals like Procter & Gamble and Unilever and different companies in between. But for the past sort of 15 years or so, I've been working in this area of sustainability and corporate responsibility as a consultant. My areas of expertise are in strategy, materiality, reporting, and all forms of sustainability and CSR communications. I work mainly with global clients around the world, and I, try and get involved in as many debates and dialogues as I can, because I just like to talk. But more than 15 years ago, when I sort of started out focusing in this area, like reporting was just a trickle, and it was an option. And GRI was just about starting to build momentum. But today, as Judy said, disclosure has sort of become an expectation, maybe even an obligation. And that's because expectations of companies have changed over time too. In the early days, it was about managing your business to support people and communities and minimizing negative impacts like do no harm, was the big mantra of the day. But today, it's much more about the role that business plays in society and the way business can contribute to social transformation. And it's moving from passive to active, from keeping your own house in order. It's moving to actively contributing to helping everybody keep their house in order. So the lines between business and civic duty and financial frameworks and regulation, are all blurring a little bit, and it's a bit harder to compartmentalize. So there have been successes, yes. I mean, there has been a transformation, albeit a slow evolution. Companies today are operating against new expectations. And by and large, there is a growing awareness of the new concepts of sustainability and this new sexy thing now called corporate purpose, which is having everybody declaring new strategies and new ways of thinking. There's much more disclosure than there ever was. And we know much more about how companies work than we ever did. But the challenges are many. First, true integration of sustainability thinking and decision-making processes has been achieved by very few, if any. Second, disclosure is patchy, inconsistent, and it's often inaccurate. Third, regulators and thought leaders in the field are divided, fragmented, and even worse, highly competitive. Instead of working in the public interest, everybody's working in their own interest, and that's rather damaging. And fourth, the information overload, the metrics, the ratings, the rankings, the scoring, all the awards, I mean, it's all rather misleading. The wide variations in approaches is everyone measuring different things. It's all clouding the landscape, and we're turning the conversation into, what did you score? Where did you rank? Instead of real life, real world difference that we're making. So I echo Judy's point about, let's move to action that makes a real difference. And, you know, I was always an optimist, so I'm sure we'll be able to resolve these challenges. Thank you.
That's great. I think we all hope so and are trying to achieve that. Nelmara, over to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. GRI has been a big presence in my life, and I have the pleasure to have been you all around me through this path. So it's really a great moment to see your face. I have been with you in so many different moments, and we have been through so many things together. We still are, right? So we still are all there kind of holding the flags and trying to get companies and leaders and experts in the direction we believe is the right one. So it's a special moment. So I am in this situation. COVID got me in Brazil. After many years living in Amsterdam, teaching Boston and spending some time with companies and experts in Brazil, now I have been spending 2020 in Brazil, which gives me a perspective of what's going on here in connecting what's the landscape in Brazil with the rest of the world. So I met GRI in 1999, Judy, for your point, you know, how old are we? I didn't realize. So GRI came to Brazil, 2 people from GRI, 2 founders actually, and they end up talking to the people at Ethos Institute. Ethos Institute was a very young organization trying to start a place for discussions around corporate social responsibility in Brazil. And Brazilians, they always think that, we always think that, or I don't anymore, but we used to think that everybody knows better. So we thought all the countries in the world had already an agenda and ways to, you know, deal with corporate social responsibility. And then we discovered that was not true. The agenda was to be built. And so I went to be part of the Stakeholder Council at GRI, representing NGOs from Brazil. So this is the way I met GRI for the first time, and we started understanding the universe of measurements. And as a matter of fact, establishing a global language, as I used to say, to talk about those issues. And I think this is the most important achievement of GRI and its network, is kind of establish a language, even if you have problems in grammar, and in you know, sometimes you use slang or it's very inaccurate, but this is it. So we have a language to talk about it. And I think this was the beginning of this story. In 2003, I went from Ethos to Natura, today Natura Cosmetics, that just bought Avon and the Body Shop. And Natura was the first company in South America, I think, Latin America, to report using the GRI guidelines. So it was really new. And if you think about it, we are 17 years later. We have thousands and thousands of companies using the GRI guidelines around the globe. We have regulators in over 40 countries. We have many regulators in the stock exchange institutions asking for information around it. We have Bloomberg terminals having the GRI indicators all around it. So this was not even a dream 15 years ago. So I think from this side of the equation, we do see lots of interest and imagination, ways of using this capital. Is an intellectual capital that was only possible because so many people have worked hard to create, and people in so many countries. And I think this is the second big interesting asset of this movement, is to create this network of people working and creating this capital that becomes the language. In 2006, I went to work in Amsterdam at the GRI offices to establish the network of training partners with Asthildur. Asthildur was one of my first companion in this road. And in 2013, I was the deputy chief executive at GRI when we launched G4. And G4 was a milestone because then we knew we are global. We could go anywhere and talk about GRI. I remember Asthildur coming from a trip telling me about she has been Azerbaijan, I think, and they kind of received her in the airport with a red carpet. So this was a very important moment at GRI history. And this is the thing. So we are all, the professionals around GRI, for me, they are guardians of the conversation about sustainability in a way, because we know the importance, we know the language, we know how much has costed all of us to get to the point we are today. Is it enough to transform business in a sustainable world? No, it's not, but it's an excellent tool. So it's still the most robust framework around the globe, collaborating with many other frameworks. And I hope we are heading to some type of unification, as we have been working around this since G4, to have it more and more aligned, everybody looking in the same direction as much as possible for measurements. I think the biggest gap today is the fact that society is facing very real concrete problems. And we have a global major lack of leadership. Maybe not because the leaders are not of high quality, we are all leaders. It's just because we have many more problems to solve. We need more people taking initiatives, focusing on concrete problems. And companies more than ever, we're gonna have to play this role. And they were not built for this. So it's like we're trying to solve a problem with a tool that was built for something else, but that's the tool we have. So companies are the center of power, resources, and we have to count on them for the next chapter. I think this is where I'm kind of looking at how we're going to do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelmara. Yeah, you refer to the concept of the common language. This is, of course, something that we still use and in terms of GRI. And the fact that, yeah, we are here to celebrate the 12th translation of the standards obviously goes to show that that this is being used across the board, you could say. And but it's interesting. So when we were starting back there in 2006, 2007, Nelmara, we were sometimes I describe it as we were waving. We have something here. Please use it. And so this was a practice of the few, you know, and it was like they had to explain why on earth they were going through all of this. But now that it has changed, actually, like Judy was also referring to earlier, and there are also different stakeholder groups, as we call them, that are now in, have come to the forefront there. And one of them that we often refer to are the investors. They were maybe not that interested in the early days, and this was, like I said, just a niche practice. But yeah, so investors, there are lots of initiatives, sustainable initiatives for investors, etc. But and others have come forward as well. And now we are often confronted with this concept of confusion. You know, there is so much out there. And also, just to get back to the terminology or of language, that there are sort of two different terms that are often used, and sort of that is, we come from the background where we always talk about sustainability reporting, but now there is the term ESG is very often dropped as well. And so I think people are confused. Is it the same? Is there a difference? What is the difference? Judy, maybe I could, throw this one over to you.
Sure, sure. Well, yes. And I mean, I think a couple of things. One is that, just as far as terminology is concerned, ESG is the term of art that seems to have taken hold more successfully in the investment arena. And for this reason, it holds a degree of attractiveness to many companies. These shifts in terminology have taken place repeatedly over the years. It's just as likely as not that it will happen again. So we can't get too attached to the language. For example, the concept of CSR, corporate social responsibility, seems to be out of fashion in many regions, although still very relevant in others. So I don't think it really helps us to seek uniformity in these terms. But what has happened in terms of the ESG concept, and I do think that this is a very recent kind of development. It's perhaps a less value-laden term than sustainability. It's created more space for people to become active in this space without having to feel that they have to change their opinions or their philosophy or their political views or their positions on the role of private sector organizations. And I think it's always helpful to make the space more welcoming to more people. So I think that's kind of where we are with a lot of organizations. Although it's not, it doesn't hold universal appeal, and really no term ever will hold universal appeal. To the extent that ESG has been taken up in investment circles, I think it's worth flagging that the terminology itself does not change the status quo. It points to a kind of analytical approach in which investments can apparently be made as the result of an ESG integration process, which would still contribute to today's worryingly unsustainable trends and do nothing to turn the tide. So I think, you know, there will always be people in different circles, and just individually will always have their preferences as far as the terms that we like to use. I don't think it's necessary for us to get too attached to one phrase or another. Really the point is to enable good, solid decision making on the basis of environmental, social, governance, economic performance and strategy information.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that is indeed, terminology can sometimes get in the way, and it has also this cultural component to it. And Elaine, maybe I want to drop over to you. It's also kind of a terminology and something that is new. You know, at GRI, we obviously, the standards, previously guidelines, we're principle based, and we have the principle, for instance, of sustainability context, where it's very important to apply so that, you know, to measure impact. And yeah, and then there is the materiality principle that has kind of taken on a life of its own. But then recently we have started to see the term of double materiality. And so what is, does it exist? Is there a double materiality? Is there how? Can you help us out here? What do you think?
Yes, well, you've given me the easy question, right? Not. Sustainability context. Well, you know, there's an entire school of thought that says sustainability context is about you know, carving up the allocation of the Earth's carrying capacities, and that companies should operate within those allocations, you know, like carving up the world and giving a piece to everybody. Well, I don't subscribe to this approach. To me, this is more about philosophizing than it is about real practical action. You know, sustainability context is around, you know, the environment that you're operating in, and the trends and pressures and expectations that you're needing to face as a business. But I do believe that every company can and probably should work to absolute goals as fast as we can, like, you know, zero carbon, zero waste, 100% inclusion, 100% circularity. I mean, instead of endlessly debating the goals and debating the context and developing all of these elaborate frameworks, you know, such as environmental profit and loss statements and other ways of monetizing things that can't be monetized, you know, maybe we should focus on the action that we know that's in the right direction and allocate the resources to make that happen. Because to me, the debate should be about the pace of travel and not the direction. But we can look at the sustainability context in this context with reference to materiality. Now, materiality is another thing then that's fallen victim to the self-interest of players on the sustainability playground. Like, everyone wants to differentiate their version of materiality and no one wants to be left behind. And we've been seeing all these terms for materiality emerging so that everyone can do a bit more, you know, analysis paralysis. Double materiality is something that refers to the fact that things are material either from a financial standpoint or from a sustainability standpoint. So we can neatly compartmentalize issues and prioritize them into whether they affect the investor's bank balance or whether they affect our lives. Dynamic materiality, another super duper term, refers to the fact that sustainability materiality, things that are material from a sustainability standpoint, change over time. And some of them become financially material. That's why it's dynamic. Okay. And let's look at COVID-19. That's a case in point. All of a sudden, what was a really low focus on employee health or virtual working, well, that's now suddenly become center stage, and it's had far-reaching implications on businesses. Businesses many have even changed their business models, moving from physical businesses to almost entirely e-commerce. Just look at the stock prices. We're speaking on the Zoom platform. Stock prices Zoom was $62 in December 2019. Guess where it was in October 2020? Any guesses? Yep, $568. Now, who can say that's not financially material? And then look at the other side, the hospitality industry, the travel industry, the airlines industry. I mean, they've also taken serious financial hits from a big trend that has serious sustainability implications. So, somebody will probably invent another term, like blended materiality or super materiality or purpose-driven materiality. We all love jargon in this field, right? But the problem about these terms is it's the wrong debate. The ladder is against the wrong wall. We should have one concept, material, period, because it significantly impacts our lives. Whether these things that impact our lives have a financial impact on a particular business is for every business to evaluate and address. It will be different. In some cases, it'll make zero difference to the bottom line. In other cases, it'll be a clear overlap. And this is a challenge. And I think one of the problems in all of this is that, the sustainability community stole this term from the financial community, right? Financial materiality was an established term, and it has a very clear meaning in the financial community and in the financial standards and protocols. And all of a sudden, here we are, sustainability people, we're talking about impacts, not about money. And all of a sudden, we started to use this term and make it our centerpiece. And that was the start, I think, of a lot of confusion, discomfort, and form of competition between the stockholder and the stakeholder voices. So personally, I may be, everyone may disagree with me, but I think we should dial back on this. I think we should let the investors have their materiality and use it as they wish to make as much money as they want to make. If they actually understand how to evaluate the financial impact of sustainability issues, I think most of it's currently guesswork anyway. I think the sustainability community should adopt another term, like impactability or something more pronounceable. Then no one will get confused. But that's unlikely to happen because materiality has become a bit of a cult and no one wants to break away. But I think, the bottom line for all of that, and thank you for allowing me to share these wild thoughts, the bottom line, I think, is that the evolution for sustainability thinking has to be based on 3 C's. Common sense, first and foremost, clarity and consistency. And it has to be in the public interest, not in the interest of people, wanting to claim the fame for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very, very good and thorough sharing of your views. It was a really interesting and interesting point about the stealing of the materiality concept from the financial ones. I'm sort of sticking to.
I hope no one will sue me for that comment.
No, I'm sticking to some kind of terms. Another term, Nelmara, that has always been sort of circulating. That's the comparability of data, and I think. It can mean so many things. It can mean, you compare your own performance year on year, but you also, you're comparing yourself against others. And I think this is also something with the increased interest from the finance or investor communities, because they are looking to where to invest, so that the comparability becomes, I guess, very important for them. What are your views sort of on how this maybe has also evolved? Yeah.
It says this is a discussion that is as old as anything we have measured, as humanity has measured, to be honest. I'm a physicist as my background, so I have been around discussions what to compare and how to compare all my life, all types of methodologies. So this is the first alert I used to give when you're talking about comparability, is because this is something that's going to be always on the table. There is no final definitive way to talk about that, first thing. The second thing is, why do we want to compare? Is really to decide where to invest, or it's just because we are kind of addicted to that? Because as a matter of fact, if you think about what a sustainability report is, or ESG reports are, and I'm gonna just give you words to that because I think there is a kind of interesting thing going on the market. But if you think about that, what you are communicating or what a company is expressing through those reports, as a matter of fact, is the quality of the leadership team. When you read a report, you as an investor or anybody should be able, or will be able, and this is the thing now, we got it, will be able to understand how this team of leaders are considering the context where business is operating, positioning themselves, defining focus through materiality, wherever materiality they choose to do, and acting. So the whole conversation around now, the most popular investors group is BlackRock, is because they are saying that for years now. They are saying, you know, you have to report on those. I remember in the past called non-financial issues. Then I went to a discussion in Italy and everybody was talking about extra financial issues. And now we can say financial issues, right? Because reputation has a very, very strong connection with the value of companies on the market. We know that it's measurable. Reputation, the relation between the value of a company and their reputation, intangible assets, is measurable, is everywhere. You can see that. So I think this is the thing. We have to understand that we're trying to compare, as a matter of fact, quality of leadership teams leading a business through very, very stormy times. And this is the thing. So you're going to have to, I think we have to understand what we want to compare here. Of course, we can always, if we have a goal like zero carbon, for example, as Elaine was mentioning, it's much easier because you can compare to very kind of clear indicators firsthand. Let's give it a chance. What's going on towards a goal. But you have always to read the footnotes because, okay, zero carbon emissions in which part of the value chain? It's exactly like financial reports. Financial data have no meaning without the context, the footnotes. It's going to be the same. So no news there. I'm sorry to say that. There is no, you know, magic tool now for sustainability that's going to solve all the problems we have with comparability through history. So I think this is the thing. You have to understand what is a report, what you're really talking about in a report in terms of quality of the leadership. And even if you want to take one topic and try to compare two companies in the same sector, you're always going to have to consider where are they operating, what they are talking about, is the value chain, is part of the value chain. Even companies that are well known by their sustainability agendas like Natura & Co, you're going to see if you start reading their goals, you really have to be careful because they are very precise in which part of the chain they are talking about. And this is the trick. Pay attention to the boundaries and go for comparability, but pay attention to the boundaries. And remember that the report is about much more than the thing you're trying to compare to see if there is a competitive edge there. And I just want to make one comment more before I move on. We move on to the next topic, Asthildur, is on ESG, because I agree there is confusion, and I have never been so requested to clarify questions around sustainability report, ESG, management system, sustainability management. So remember, I had to teach another day, and I was digging into where this ESG thing comes from, and came from the Global Compact, a publication in 2006 that's called "Who Cares Wins," if I'm not wrong, right, Judy? Right, Elaine? I think that's it. And this was a kind of a try to translate the language of sustainability to investors. It is the first time they spoke about ESG. And of course, nowadays, normally it's used as a summary. So you pick some, if you read all the last documents from the Big Four around what are the acceptable ESG indicators, it's always a kind of a selection of very often GRI indicators that they want to have all companies reporting on. GRI has its mandatory indicators anyways, and they are not few, there are many. So this should be enough for a core for ESG management reference, so to say. I think we have all there. But if you think about sustainability, of course, its origins are into human rights declaration. So what means quality of life is the 30 articles of human rights declaration. And then you have you go until you get to the Brundtland report, right? With we need a development model that sustain quality of life on the planet for all people, life in general, and businesses. So this is where we are now. So if you think about sustainability, you don't want to think about all that. You want only to take the summary, fine, but it's always in the sustainability field, think about the rest. Where is this ESG coming from, and why is this just a selection of some topics? But anyway, sustainability reports or ESG reports are always going to be talking about the quality of the leadership team.
A very, very interesting summary and a view on that term. Thank you. Judy, Nelmara kind of referred to it, she was referring to the documents of the Big Four, etc. There are so many of these initiatives and coming out, and everybody luckily is we're all looking in the same direction, but everybody kind of like also was with the materiality. We're all doing it from a, we have our own maybe agenda or interest. And so I happened to see a blog post that you wrote about the alphabet soup. Mm-hmm. So maybe I could invite you to just reflect a little bit on everything that is out there, and maybe the differences or not. Yeah. Differences.
Yeah. So what Asthildur is referring to is the fact that we have seen in recent months, maybe the last 6 months or so, a steady stream of initiatives from various organizations and groups of organizations, mainly in the sustainability reporting space, who are all, for one reason or another, seeing the need to create some kind of a change in order to enable more sustainability reporting and better use of information and so forth. For my own part, I will say, first of all, on behalf of the GSSB, on GRI's position is that we strongly believe in a single global set of sustainability disclosure standards and remain completely committed to achieving that. It has to be done in collaboration with other standards and frameworks, and there has to be a kind of greater momentum generated towards reducing overlapping, redundant, potentially inconsistent and confusing disclosures that don't add anything to the space. At the same time, I would also say that a great deal of the confusion that legitimately exists right now in the among civil society, among investors, and very crucially among corporate report preparers, report makers, has to do with the analysis and aggregation of data being done by different ratings agencies and investment information services and so forth. And on that side, it's unsurprising to me, at least, that there's a lot of variation and divergence in terms of what the specific information those ratings agencies and the investor information services are looking for from companies, as well as the results and recommendations that they generate. I think this is unsurprising because investors don't all want the same things. And because in many cases, what we're seeing is the very rapid growth and collection of information, while the concepts and tools to make sense of it are all still emerging. So we get famous examples such as Tesla being rated variously as both the best and the worst in the automotive sector by different ESG ratings agencies based on the same data. And the frustration that this engenders often causes people to think, well, what we need now is a new set of disclosure standards to make sure that everybody's disclosing the same things, when in fact they're largely disclosing the same things. It's that the analysis going into them, making use of those disclosures, is entirely various and inconsistent, and not necessarily actually driven by a clear philosophy or investment approach, but by a very early stage of analytical sort of thinking around what does ESG information indicate about the prospects for any given company, any given. I think that this, in terms of the standard setting and the frameworks sort of organizations, I very much agree with what both Elaine and Nelmara have said about the fact that there is self-interested activity that's taking place on all sides. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas is the expression that people say in the UK, and therefore it's quite, it's quite natural for organizations to kind of fight their corner and to try to dig their heels in, maintain their position. That's quite natural. At the end of the day, the planet will not thank us for just needless, sort of, ongoing kind of competition for the sake of competition or for the sake of our own individual organizational positions. And we will simply have to get to a stage where there is more consolidation, there is more proper formal convergence between disclosure frameworks and standards, and a very much greater degree of practical interoperability between these, so that it facilitates the release of information as well as the analysis of information in a much more reliable way.
Thank you. Elaine, I actually wanted to, on that same subject, I also wanted to quote you, I think, where you said, we don't need more frameworks or initiatives, we need better implementation. I think I quote you more or less correctly.
Yeah, well, that's a sort of a mantra that I have, and I say it many times in different ways, so you probably picked up one of them. And yeah, and I agree, I think, very much with Judy's conclusions. I mean, we need to keep it simple, clear, and consistent. There needs to be more focus on driving sustainable systemic change and less on debating all these frameworks and metrics. We need to be clear about what we're measuring, though. And it's not only about value creation, which is where all our, investor friends are looking specifically, or just positive and negative impact. It's about accountability. I mean, we don't lose sight of accountability in all of this mix. Companies have fundamental accountability across many dimensions of their activity, not just the ones they decide are material. So I am actually in favor of a baseline of topics. I've been, saying this for a long time as well, that all companies, all industries, all sizes should be transparent about, even before they do their sophisticated materiality analysis. Now, GRI has the basis for this, right? GRI is the only standard setter actually that has the basis for this. It's a matter of defining which of those indicators are most critically relevant to reflect the critical mass of all businesses everywhere that reflect accountability. I mean, the WEF, World Economic Forum, put out this new framework recently, which, I thought was a big waste of time. Sorry to insult lots of intelligent people who obviously worked very, very hard on this, but the thinking was good. the thinking in that framework said, let's have baseline accountability for all companies to all report certain things. I like that. But the execution was inappropriate because instead of selecting existing best practice and frameworks like GRI, and they did use a lot of GRI standards, but some of them they like fine-tuned and tweaked and everything, they just developed a whole new thing. So, you know, there's an element of good thinking, but it sort of got screwed up in the way they put it out. But accountability is only the start. We need to establish a clear universal methodology for defining what's material, or as we're now going to call it, impactability. You know, companies need to have a methodology to assess their own position on the scale, you know, in terms of positive and negative impact, and put plans in place to address this. And then if you've got accountability and impactability, we also then need to think very clearly about contribution. It's this outside-in thinking, right? We need these broad, simple goals that I talked about before: 100% zero waste, 100% zero carbon, 100% carbon neutral, whatever, living wage, circularity. I mean, the Sustainable Development Goals are a great start point for this, right? And there is a body of thought that's developing a framework for measuring the impact of companies in terms of their contribution to achieving the SDGs. That work's being led by Professor Carol Adams. And there's a new body that's been built up called the Impact Management Project that's actually working to create impact measurement methodologies. And there is actually a great framework which very few people talk about or think of these days, but I think it's well worth looking at, and that's the Future Fit benchmark. That's also based on absolute goals and is totally aligned with the SDGs. So we should spend less time debating the goals and more time on evaluating the pace of change toward these absolute goals, and not only the scale of change. And if you have all these things like accountability, impactability, contribution, then, you know, I think we can actually change the world. But it won't change unless people start changing their mindsets and truly acting in the public interest. You know, as optimistic as I always have been, I'm not optimistic that that will happen, because, you know, too many people, exactly as Judy said, too many people have too big a stake in keeping things complex. So what we have to rely on is enlightened corporate leadership. And now I go back to something Nelmara said, which I very, very much agree with. Corporate boards and executives need to focus on these things: accountability, sustainability, materiality, contribution, and use the tools that exist, right, to strategize, focus, measure, account, report. Many companies are doing it. GRI is a good tool for all of these, and it's a common ground starting point that everybody can use. And GRI is continuing to enhance its standards and its accounting methodologies. Still some gaps, still a lot more work to do, but it's getting better as we move forward. And now it's even in Portuguese. It's even more accessible. So I think that's my message. You know, use what we have and make it work better, and focus on accountability, on the impact that you're having, and the contribution that you're making to sustainable development.
Thank you. Very nicely put. And yeah, materiality obviously keeps popping up. And Nelmara, you told us at the beginning that COVID had sort of enabled you to spend most of 2020 in your home country, Brazil. And so, yeah, obviously the pandemic is also having impact. Well, you mentioned it, the stock shares that have risen because of unexpected turn of events. And but this is what we are hearing from those in our network at GRI that we are engaging with, is that companies, they think, okay, what was material for me, you know, in 2019 is just completely not highest on the list, possibly in 2020. So, Nelmara, for you also work directly with companies, and are you? I suppose you're also detecting or finding this? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what you are seeing? Because in my opinion, then I think social issues, you know, because of the impact that this has on health and on staff, etc., that they are actually also coming to the forefront. And obviously in Brazil, the situation has been quite great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have been working with many companies, but also other organizations thinking about, you know, what's going on in terms of the sustainability field in Brazil and elsewhere, because I also teach in Boston. So there are lots of discussions in the US that are very similar. And I follow the conversations in Europe. So I think everywhere, everybody's thinking about what's going on and how we reposition ourselves, our analysis, our focus, considering the context, which is kind of, again, we have very good tools around the GRI movement for that, right? So the principles and everything can really guide you thinking about how to reposition because the context has changed. So I think the first thing that this crisis, horrible crisis brought is the fact that we, as Elaine and Judy are saying, we have to focus on real impacts. We have to really consider reality, understand the main problems, and focus as companies, as organizations, what we're going to do about that. And this is through this exercise that you really find your material topics. You know, the whole methodology is just kind of steps for you to really decide where to focus. And I think this reality brought this conversation again to the table. So are we focusing on the right things? The topics we have been focusing to 2019 are the right ones, considering the changing the context. So what's really happening from what I can see is that companies are considering what they have selected as material topics or most relevant topics till now, and they are rechecking it. And it's also true that for many companies, this has changed a lot. For example, companies that have moved totally to a virtual context with all the new problems employees and their suppliers have around this new context, they do have to answer to new real problems that they didn't have to answer before. Nobody expects them to consider that an executive with 3 children at home without going to school gonna have other issues to participate in meetings than they had before. Very simple. Or mental health, right? Big topic everywhere in the world again. So how are we gonna keep people going under the circumstances? And what means to business, for example, this week on the news in Brazil, there is a big news about a bank that has been extremely profitable this year. And everybody's asking how. And one of the indicators is that the press is disseminating is the number of people that they have terminate contracts with is extremely high. So is this the right move to do in the COVID year for a bank that's already very profitable anyways? You're not talking about a business that is not going well, right? So particularly in Brazil, the most profitable banks, financial institutions in the world are partially here. So we're gonna have to think about what we are doing this year. So I do believe that the context will have impact on where to focus. But at the end of the day, everything is about accountability. I have to do my best and I have to be accountable to society, to everybody around this business, my stakeholders that help me, you know, keeping working and operating. What have I done and which are my plans? And even if I have made mistakes or bad choice in the past, what am I gonna do about that? Right? Everybody's learning at this moment. It's really difficult for leaders of any type to decide exactly where to focus. But I go back to Judy's and Elaine's comments on partially common sense and do not waste your time, right? I really believe that all leaders I have been working closely, they are not concerned about which metrics they're gonna use. They are not really concerned about, am I getting this right? How the reputation of my company is going to be out there. Ooh, we have done mistakes. What can we do to improve it? And now I'm helping many of them improving their reports for next year. So lots of this conversation, in my opinion, have to be in the reports. I don't care about, you know, which combination of letters you're going to choose. I advise you to get GRI because it's ready and done, and you're going to have lots of examples and experts that can help you with that. But the thing is, you're going to have to tell this story in 2020 in a coherent way, clear way, simple way, so people can follow you. Now, I don't think there is another option. The data on the connection between capital, intangible capital and reputation have never been clear before. So I have been following this data since 2005. There are organizations analyzing it, and the numbers only, in any sector, the value of a company on stock exchange market, in any market, the percentage of the value of a company is more and more based on intangible values where reputation is. This is not a coincidence. This is because we're in digital times. This is because we are facing very, very, very hard problems, and we have to trust institutions, companies to invest, or at least to give the, how do you say, the chance of the doubt if you were making a mistake. I think this is where we are for 2020. And I think 2021, we're going to have the most interesting and revealing reports ever in the last decade, because we're going to have to really learn a lot about how these leaders and these people and these experts on the field have helped these companies telling the stories that we need them to tell. And we, as citizens, as consumers and experts, we have a big role to play, because we should take 10 minutes of our week, every week in the year, to have a look at reports of companies that we are very close to, have this you know, this interest, and try to also make decisions based on what is written there. So women, why are you having your bank accounts with companies that don't have diversity or do not have act on COVID times? You should change your bank account, right? As I heard from a financial institution leader another day, right? In an event. So we should be more consequent also ourselves as citizens and experts, how we use this information, the reports. They will become more important, I'm sure.
Great. Wow. Well, I agree with you. Absolutely. Judy, I think did you flag that you wanted to say something?
Not particularly, but I could just make one little suggestion for listeners. If you're interested in sort of, I mean, we hear a lot recently that suggests quite breathlessly that investors now have understood ESG. They've understood the value of sustainability for company success in the future, and therefore we should take comfort that investors are going to save us. I think we are still in an age when the lion's share of interests from the investment community has to do with understanding ESG risk. But what this means for investors is they'd like to know how they can avoid losing money and how they can find the ways to make the most money. It's not really at all at this stage about avoiding runaway climate change or ensuring justice or anything like that. So we still have to take responsibility for what actually results from any of the activities that we undertake. And you know, the counterbalance, I think, to all of this interest from investors and even from individual corporate organizations, I think has to do with understanding much better what's the emerging role of regulators and governments in taking decisions that actually drive markets to do things that markets are not doing by themselves. I'll leave it there.
Great.
Thank you, Judy.
Great, thank you. Elaine, I was wondering what we have something you, because you also work with companies, you know, to help them with the reporting. And what we have also heard from those that we have engaged with this year is that often when there has been, you know, crisis, we need to cut, etc., the first ones to leave or to be cut off were the sustainability staff or even departments. But we are hearing that they are now, so also coming back to something that Nelmara was saying, that they are now actually called to the table and asked to explain for what is this, what are these risks, what can we do, how can we identify them? Is this something that you have also kind of noticed from your
yeah,
community?
Absolutely. You know, the COVID-19 has emphasized or exacerbated, you know, different perceptions and approaches. So, you know, we now all think of nurses in a totally different way, and the value of nurses in our society and frontline healthcare workers. And I think the same thing has happened to executive leadership teams and the way they think about sustainability professionals. And I think that there is a realization that, you know, you cannot do business in a world which is not, you cannot do a thriving business in a world which is not thriving. You have to be aware of and prepared for some of these changes. I mean, nobody, I think, could really, nobody did, I think, prepare for COVID-19 and to the scale and the severity that we've experienced it this year. But many companies have been preparing business continuity plans. Some companies have even had, you know, pandemic crisis teams ready to be activated, because this isn't the first pandemic businesses have known. So I think part of that sustainability thinking, part of the way we approach business risk and opportunity is about, you know, understanding what's going on in the wider world and being prepared for it and doing that in a systematic way. Some companies have done really well through the pandemic. You know, there are many that have been almost decimated, but there are some that, you know, people are now eating at home, people are now using virtual platforms, people are now using things in a way that's totally different. And many companies have seen their business, you know, absolutely skyrocket. And with that, there's also an aspect of responsibility. How do we do that in a responsible way? How do we take advantage of a crisis legitimately, but do it in a way which is inclusive, which doesn't perpetuate the, you know, the divides in our society? So I think, yes, very much so. I think, you know, the CSR, sustainability profession, whatever you like to call it, the folks in the business who look at that interaction between business and society and ethical and accountable behavior, I think those are the ones who are being called to the table. I work with clients, you know, that where maybe they've even had leadership changes in the past few years or even in the past year, and the sustainability teams have stayed in place and are at, you know, at the board table in some cases, you know, not just about the CEO and the executive team. It really is starting to hit discussions in the boardroom. So yes, I think it's a new realization for some, a reinforcement for others.
That kind of confirms what we are also hearing from our network. I was asked to remind the participants that we are welcoming questions. If you have any questions for us, we still have some time that we could spend on questions. But yeah, this is indeed a weird time that we live in, and everybody is impacted in some ways. But so they were obviously mentioned before, the SDGs, and that this is, we are now 5 years into the 15 years of achieving the SDGs, and I agree with you. I think that they are, of course, an excellent starting point for companies to also kind of organize themselves around goal setting and target setting, because this is something we have all signed up for, or our governments on our behalf, to be honest. And so are you also feeling that companies are focusing more on SDGs? Is it coming more sort of on top of mind now in this year where everything, when the world is actually changing and we have to change with it? What, Judy, what do you think?
Yes, well, I think the SDGs have always had a certain appeal to at least to some companies in terms of kind of understanding what should we be working on and how should we be framing our contributions to sustainability. The challenge with working at an organizational level with the SDGs is that they were not created for the purpose. You know, they were created as goals for governments, and how you stack up corporate activities to a sort of national and international set of goals, it's not always a straightforward process. I agree very much with the mention that Elaine made of the various recent initiatives around accounting for performance towards the SDGs. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the early attempts, which are very well intended, really, but I think a lot of the early attempts at companies, you know, sort of using the SDGs as a bit of a guidepost for their sustainability activities, is that it has encouraged a certain kind of just to focus on positives and a bit too much anecdotal kind of information. However, I think certainly at the level of countries, I don't know about internationally, I think it's a bit hard to say for multinational businesses, the role of the SDGs. In 2021, I think, to touch on Nelmara's point, I think we will see a lot of really quite interesting discussion around how certain SDGs have been, have influenced thinking within the context of a single country, I think, in the context of all of the trouble and turmoil that the business sector and society at large has experienced during this year. The SDGs remain a kind of iconic initiative, and I think there are so many interesting attempts to try to make it come alive for different users. I certainly expect to see that continue for the next couple of years or so. It does need to get into the actions, and it does need to get into the negatives and to, you know, the analysis of what we're not achieving and why. But that'll be true of almost any kind of initiative like this that you might care to name.
I was on mute now. I'm so excited. We have a question. Christina Barbosa is asking, in your point of view, what are the main and essential steps for a company to accelerate their path to sustainability in the COVID-19 scenery? Who wants to take this on? Nelmara?
Yeah, sure. Let me just kind of connect this question with the last comments from Elaine and Judy, because what I have seen is sometimes it's a misreading about sustainability teams getting weaker or not as important as they should be, or they are too junior for the task, you know. But the truth is, when you start really looking what's going on in companies, as Elaine and Judy were saying, this conversation is going to many different levels now and very rapidly. So this year, I don't know how many requests we had to prepare something for executive teams or for boardrooms on ESG or sustainability or the connection, the differences. Which are the steps to be taken to accelerate, you know, the transition to a more ESG-like or based approach to managing business. So there is a lot going on in many different levels in the company. So this is really the moment where you can tell there is almost no professional, no function in a company or any organization. To be honest, NGOs should also get smarter, and, you know, governmental agencies also. But there is almost no functionality in a company and an institution that has not been punched by the new conversation. Communications, you have to know everything. So there are companies that our role has been only to connect sustainability to communications because they didn't translate things to each other. So the company could not communicate. There are companies we have been called to help the executive team to get used to the narrative of ESG, how they should talk about diversity or what they're doing about COVID connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are lots of questions around there. So one of the questions is exactly this one. What can we do to accelerate more, I used to say pro-sustainability practices in our business? Yeah, it's a kind of a pro movement. So in my opinion, I think there are many ways, entry points. There is not only one entry point. For example, we working on reporting field, we know that when a company decides to report, it's very difficult to stop reporting. So we create a movement towards clarity and accountability, the transparency movement, which is very valuable if you have not done this before. So you have to put the name of your company and your executives under data that are not financial data audited by somebody who is saying we are responsible for it. So it's really a big step. So this is one entry point. You start reporting and then you start to make kind of understanding where you are. And then you start kind of connecting to the conversation that is out there. And then you start having to set goals, because the next year you're going to have to report on those things. Everybody can read it. Maybe they will not read it, but they could. So I think this is one entry point. Start understanding where you are in the different topics that are the hot topics of society, real problems society is facing. How are you engaging for them? Try to understand that first. And then how to measure progress around those, issues, topics. And then start thinking about policies and everything. Another very, very powerful way I have found in the last years is starting with public commitments. And this I have learned with the International Guidance on Human Rights for Business. You start with public commitments. Which are the public commitments your company is ready to go for? And this is a very interesting discussion you can have with very high level people, but almost anyone in the company has an opinion, which commitments the company should go for. And then after you have a set of public commitments, okay, now what you're gonna do to make them real. So you are committed to a better climate. So what are you gonna do? Or you are committed to diversity. What are you gonna do? You are committed to fight against poverty or equal rights, or there are so many real problems you should be kind of committing to. And then I think starting with public commitments, and then you start going to, okay, what are you gonna do about them? Then you see you're gonna need plans, you're gonna need measurements, you're gonna see you need goals, you need a plan year by year to talk to the ones that are listening to your public commitments. And so we start kind of moving the entire organization, and sometimes sounds very simple and a little bit, maybe too general, but it's not. This is a kind of simple conversations. If you really do them, you can really go a long path, rebuilding lots of processes and way of thinking these organizations. I just want to emphasize that starting by what regulators are telling you or investors are telling you, of course, it's a way of starting it, but it's not what we're going to get your business to the next chapter of economy of what we're having to build here, right? So this is good. This is also another entry point, but business have their interests, and this is financial interest purely almost in most of the business, lowering risks, and this is why we're getting to that now, and increasing financial results. And this is good, it's wonderful, but this is only one piece of the big puzzle we're going to have to solve to get society into the next chapter of a kind of sustainable development, a way of developing or improving quality of life for all, right?
Great. There is another question here that is, maybe I will pass that on to you, Elaine, because you're experienced in helping people with their sustainability report. Somebody's asking, how can we help to fight greenwashing? Good ways to fight greenwashing.
How can we help to fight greenwashing?
Yeah, I'm translating from Brazil here, no, from Portuguese.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just perhaps just preface the response to that by adding on to what Nelmara said. I mean, I agree with all of the very systematic and structured approach that Nelmara laid out for accelerating sustainability. I will come back though to, you know, at some point, I think the best result will be when it captures the hearts and minds of people. And this whole movement around corporate purpose, you know, I think, you know, we should pay attention to it really, because I mean, I read a book, you know, like, more than 10 years ago by Christina Riener. It was a book called The High Purpose Company. And this was about, you know, how corporations have succeeded because they've addressed their higher purpose, which is what we contribute to the world beyond making money. And this is a bit like, you know, what the current debate around corporate purpose is now. I think she was a bit ahead of her time then, but that book was one of the books I always remember as making a really great impression on me. I think if we can define, you know, why we exist as a business, to solve what social issue, to contribute to what social good or environmental good, to make a difference in what way, why do we exist as a business? I think that's the starting point for some very real conversations. And I've gone through this with several companies, and it's quite enlightening, and it's quite, you know, educating for a sort of discussion. And I think if you're able to do that and you educate and align around those questions, I think you build a core culture of thinking and approach around a purpose that then makes it so much easier to put all these systems in place that Nelmara described. I mean, you need system and you need structure, but if you first engage people that in something that inspires them about what we're trying to do as a business and how it's going to be a positive force in the world, I think that helps. And I think then that also addresses this question of greenwashing. I mean, how do you stop greenwashing? Well, you just tell the truth. And I think it's up to us, and it's up to this very massive body of sustainability professionals around the world to uphold our professional ethics and make sure that we are not perpetuating, you know, exaggerated or imbalanced or untrue statements about what we're doing as a business or what we want to do as a business. You know, Judy referenced it with reference to the SDGs. I mean, SDG greenwashing has suddenly become a thing, right? I think it's up to us as individuals to make sure that we display integrity in the way we work, either as part of a company or as people who consult and advise to companies. And it's up to stakeholders, it's up to the people who do use the reports, whether it's academics, whether it's consumers, whether it's, you know, regulators, to hold companies to account, to ask them questions, to publicly ask them questions. There's a lot of, I mean, one of the values of all of these weird rankings and ratings and benchmarks and indices that you find in every field, I mean, the results are usually hardly worth looking at, but the value is in the debate. It generates a discussion. It focuses a spotlight on access to medicines, know the chain, CDP, water, you know, they focus the discussion. And I think that's really super valuable. So that's how you avoid greenwashing. I mean, you know, if we all, it's so easy, but then it's also quite hard.
Yeah, Judy wants to say something.
Can I just quickly, to take nothing at all away from what Elaine says, because she's absolutely right. It is up to people to be honest and transparent and to not engage in rainbow washing or greenwashing or whatever these sort of distraction techniques might be. I happen to think that mandatory reporting will play a very important role in reduction, if not elimination, of greenwashing. Because just from the simple standpoint of leveling the playing field between reporters and non-reporters and creating hopefully a very clear and consistent basis on which disclosures should be made across particular jurisdictions on certain issues. But I think that is in addition to good professional practices on the part of both report issuers and the organizations that support them.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, fully agree with both of you. We are almost out of time. It's amazing, but there have been a couple of questions about SMEs, and I just want to add that as the last question. It's people are asking, seeing that the majority of the global economy is micro or small companies. How can we get them on board? How can we make sure that they contribute as well? Who wants to go first? Julie?
I'll do a really quick one and then pass it over. A lot of SMEs are finding that by virtue of the fact that they are part of larger global supply chains, they're being caught into the reporting practices of some of the larger kind of multinational businesses. This is something to be welcomed. So far, it's on defined topics, usually something to do with carbon or water, occasionally human rights, sorts of issues. But I think that there's a lot of value in partnering up with organizations within your value chain to help you get a better grasp of what's expected of your business, and how to best apply the limited resources that you would have for this kind of thing in a really profitable and meaningful way.
That's exactly actually how we at GRI have structured some of our SME programs. We have sort of teamed the suppliers, the smaller suppliers, and with their larger buyers than in the supply chain or value chain, to help them, take guidance from. They have gone through the robust processes of materiality assessment, stakeholder engagement. So there's a lot of learnings to be had as a first step. So that is something that a methodology that we apply and advise. I think I have to just go for the round of some final words of wisdom from all of you. There have been some messages coming through as compliments to all of you for your great discussion and how awesome it is to see all of you ladies here on the panel. So hereby I will pass that on. And so we are all aiming for a fair and a sustainable future for all. We have touched upon a lot of the topics where we are, and so what? Just a few words of wisdom that what do we need to do to get there? Are we on the right track? Elaine, you're first on my screen.
Well, I was thinking about that. Yes, what do we need to do? Well, I think the first thing is we all have to eat lots more ice cream, and then everything will be much easier. Which leads me to my second point, is that, we've got to be optimistic, and we've got to make it real, practical, and fun. There's nothing worse than someone starting to talk about sustainability, and you say, or I'm going to a sustainability meeting. Oh, how boring. I mean, sustainability, it's about helping us thrive. It's about changing the world. It's about transformation. Even reading sustainability reports, they don't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be a drudge. It's about change the world. So let's make it come alive in our businesses. I mean, Judy referenced all of these fun initiatives around the SDGs, and people holding up boards, and people doing SDG challenges and SDG songs and all this stuff. Well, that's what gets us moving. So that there has to be, it has to be positive and vibrant in the way that we address it. I think the other thing is, it has to be structured, and it has to be simple. And as we've said before, common sense, consistency, clarity, alignment, and working in the public interest, and not, trying to hold on to your own corner of the field. We'll get there. We'll have to.
Yes, great. Thank you. Judy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that one of the things that I find so exciting. I have a 14-year-old son, and I find it really exciting to see people of his age not accepting the kind of the talk about the way the world is right now and the way the world has always been and always will be. And I think that the more that we can model sustainable behavior in our lives and enjoy it, I think it's actually really fun to kind of live sustainably and to play a part, to play a meaningful role in creating a sustainable world. I just want to congratulate the business community in Brazil kind of generally. It's been one of the most sort of inspiring pockets of activity around sustainability in GRI's experience and in our experience of kind of engaging with reporters. And we very much look forward to continuing to do that.
Sorry, Nelmara, please. Yeah.
You know what I think? I think the message is the following. The next decade is let's do it decade. We know all the problems. We don't need diagnosis anymore. We know exactly what's going on. We have all information we need for that. On top of that, we have taken care of preparing GRI standards for measuring and translating it to so many languages, including Portuguese. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. You don't even have to worry about how to manage and how to measure and how to report. So let's focus most of our attention on doing. We have to know what we want to contribute to as companies, as citizens, as experts. We have to choose our focus and be consequent and be coherent about our actions. I think this is the name of the decade. Let's do it, right? So I think everything that Judy and Elaine and others and you, Asthildur, were reminding us about the GRI standards, previously the guidelines, is that. So it's a big effort, it's a big capital putting into creating this language, creating ways of measuring. Use it as much as you can. Do not spend much time with this. Do spend time in doing big things and then telling everybody, we are dying to know what you're doing. Everybody wants to know. In Brazilian companies, they have a particular problem. When I work in different countries and contexts, I see how difficult it is for Brazilian companies to really tell their stories. They do not invest as much as European or North American companies in telling what they have done in kind of nice videos, nice materials and everything in other languages. So the narrative, the stories get out there and people are going to get inspired by them. So my message is do it. Let the measurement be GRI or do not think about it. We have done it for you. And tell the story. Tell it in many ways, as many ways you can, and be honest. No greenwashing, no only beautiful stories on the plate, because this is the reputation decade. We're going to know everything. It's digital times. We're going to discover if you are not telling the truth. So be honest. Let's be honest and let's kind of build what we have to build in the next 10 years with the very young people that are already very focused on solutions.
Yes,
this is what I think.
They are. Thank you. Well, this is a wonderful way to finish. We've already stolen a few minutes from the people who wanted to take a break. I'm very sorry about that, but it was just a nice flow and a wonderful note to end on. Time of decade. It should be fun, should be clear, crisp, and structured by all means. And we hope we will all get there together. Thank you, my friends, for being with me. And
thank you, Judy, Elaine.
Clausia, thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Asthildur, thank you for doing such a great job in managing us all.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Over to you, Clausia.
Thank you, Asthildur. Thank you, Nelmara, Elaine, and Judy. Thank you so much. It was great. It was great as I was imagining. So.
That's good. We're glad we didn't disappoint. It was fun to be here with you, and good luck with the second part of the program.
Muito bom. Thank you. Thank you. Bom, pessoal, bom dia. Para quem eu ainda não falei, bom dia. Nós encerramos o primeiro painel. Essa era uma discussão que eu gostaria muito de ter feito já há um tempo, porque muitas dúvidas aparecem. Tem gente que até vem perguntar, né, uma pessoa que tem uma área de sustentabilidade, tem relatório de sustentabilidade, e chega e fala, eu quero criar uma área de ESG, porque está achando que isso é diferente. Então, assim, eu acho que essa é uma discussão que foi muito providencial e muito boa, e principalmente porque foi um painel completamente feminino, né? Então, muito obrigada, Nelmara, Elaine, né? Aprendi muitas coisas com vocês, e agora nós vamos para o próximo painel. Nós temos um pouquinho, alguns minutos de intervalo, aí se vocês quiserem sair um pouquinho e voltar, a gente volta às 10h45, né? Se vocês quiserem pegar uma água, alguma coisa, enfim. Não dá para falar que é para ir fazer networking, né? Porque agora a gente não está mais numa sessão em pessoa, enfim, presencial, enfim. Mas, enfim, vamos passar para a próxima, às 10h45, quando a gente vai ter, então, o Marco van der Rie, que é o nosso Chief Development Officer na GRI Amsterdam. Ele vai moderar, vai moderar também a Valéria Café, que é diretora de vocalização e influência no IBGC, mas é uma pessoa também que está há muito tempo, acho que mais de quase 2 décadas, envolvida com a discussão de sustentabilidade. Ela estará conosco, e também o embaixador da Holanda, né, que foi convidado porque a sede da GRI é na Holanda. Então, daqui a pouquinho nós voltamos com essas pessoas. Marco já está aqui, e eu queria só pedir, por favor, que caso vocês tenham perguntas, desculpem, nem todas as perguntas nós vamos conseguir responder, mas, por favor, coloquem no questions and answers aqui, tá? Porque no chat a gente fica difícil de controlar. Então, coloque no questions and answers. No questions and answers você pode, inclusive, votar nas melhores perguntas, porque daí a gente pode escolher qual que a gente passa para o moderador, que é o Marco, tá?
Gláucia? Tá me ouvindo?
Oi, Marcos, sim, eu tô te ouvindo.
Oi, Gláucia. Só queria testar...
Não, a Gláucia não está aqui, eu é que estou, mas você pode testar.
Oi, Adriana, queria testar o meu share screen aqui, um momento.
Pode testar, Marco.
Entrou.
Share. Vocês conseguem ver a apresentação, o PowerPoint?
Sim, não, PowerPoint não. Agora sim. PowerPoint
entrou,
está aqui.
entrou.
Isso. Agora?
Sim.
Ok, perfeito.
Nossa, isso parece
Marco,
o primeiro...
tá aparecendo pelo background, não pelo presentation.
Ah, ok. Peraí, então...
Vou colocar na apresentação.
Deixa eu ver o que está acontecendo.
Sabe o que está aparecendo, esse slide? O primeiro GRI que eu tive contato, que foi o G2, era dessa cor e era muito parecido com essa imagem.
Eu tô trabalhando com 2 telas aqui, por isso ele está assim, peraí. Share screen. Agora, você vê a tela completa?
Agora está completo.
Ok, ótimo.
Está no slide, está no segundo, acho que já está no teu segundo slide.
Isso, mas agora eu não consigo mexer. Peraí, vou ter que mudar de novo. Vale a pena testar as coisas.
Vale. Isso foi uma lição.
Eu vou duplicar melhor. Então não vai ter confusão, espero. E agora, correto, não?
Tá no primeiro slide.
E eu consigo mexer. Ótimo, ótimo. Pronto.
Tá
Excelente.
Ok, então tomo 3 minutos de intervalo. O embaixador vai chegar um pouquinho atrasado, hein? Então talvez a gente atrase um pouco o início. Começamos a 47, 48 por aí. Cláudio, correto?
Correto. Podemos inverter também, né, trazendo a Valéria para falar antes.
Não, eu acho que tá. Se ele chega na hora, se não, se a gente receber outra mensagem que ele não chega na hora, a gente começa com Valéria.
Ok.
Mas eu vou fazer uma pequena introdução antes também.
Ok.
Então, até já.
Até já.
Okay, Graham. Koen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
We
good.
are starting the Zoom, so we should be on time.
Okay, perfect.
Just Windows is updating, as always.
Yeah, always when you don't need it. Glaucia, você está? Ou Denis?
Oi, Marco.
A gente já está no visível ou estamos
Estamos
ainda
visíveis.
Ok, é bom saber. Então, vamos aguardando as pessoas chegaram. Bom dia a todos. Estamos esperando os dois participantes chegar. Vamos começar em 2 minutos.
Valéria já está conosco.
Ah, ótimo. E o embaixador entra pelo outro link. E a tradutora está aqui também, hein? Viviane.
Just a few more minutes, Marco. Apologies.
Ok. Então, eu posso começar com uma pequena reflexão sobre o primeiro painel. Eu espero que todo mundo voltou. Infelizmente, nesses momentos, não podemos organizar eventos em pessoa. O ano passado estive no Brasil, no GRI Summit, em São Paulo. Foi um grande prazer conhecer muitos de vocês que também estão aqui hoje. Não tem tempo para tomar café, comer um pão de queijo junto e conversar um pouco mais distraidamente. Mas através do Zoom temos a oportunidade de conectar com muitas pessoas no Brasil inteiro e eu espero talvez até representantes de outros países lusófonos para assistir esse evento de hoje. Glaucia, obrigado pela primeira sessão, por organizar todo este evento. Foi um painel muito interessante. Com grandes cabeças na área de sustentabilidade e de sustainability reporting, os informes de sustentabilidade do global e do Brasil. Então, foi um prazer de assistir esta primeira sessão. Hoje, pela segunda parte de manhã de vocês, temos uma segunda sessão. Estamos aguardando a chegada do embaixador da Holanda. E temos aqui também Valéria Café do IBGC. E eu vou também falar um pouco sobre o nosso trabalho no GRI. Depois temos a possibilidade de uma conversa com vocês, de perguntas, utilizando o painel de perguntas aqui no Zoom. Deixa eu fechar. Bom, primeiro gostaria de parabenizar a Glaucia com esse grande momento de ter as normas GRI em português. Eu acho que isso foi um sonho dela de muito tempo. E temos trabalhado os últimos 13 anos como Glaucia, como diretora do GRI no Brasil, com os standards em português e espanhol. Então, realmente, já estava na hora de ter as standards em português e que também poderiam ser utilizados nos outros países lusófonos. No Brasil, temos 400 empresas que já estão utilizando e fazendo seus relatórios de sustentabilidade, utilizando as normas GRI, e é fantástico que isso tenha acontecido nos últimos anos. Isso a gente se deve muito ao trabalho da Gláucia e de todos os diretores e profissionais de sustentabilidade nessas empresas. Agora temos uma língua franca de sustentabilidade em português, ou como a gente chama em inglês, global language da sustentabilidade, das normas GRI em português, que poderiam ser utilizados por todos e que vai ser, esperamos, muito útil para todas as empresas no Brasil e os outros países de língua portuguesa. E esperamos crescer significativamente o número de empresas que vão utilizar as normas GRI. Da primeira sessão, para mim, que saiu como o ponto principal é que temos trabalhado muito com os normas GRI. Tem outros sistemas de análise de frameworks, etc. Mas é a hora de fazer. Não é a hora mais de continuar discutindo qual seria a melhor forma de fazer análise de sustentabilidade para os relatores de sustentabilidade, mas realmente a decade of action, como que a Nelmara falou. Nós temos várias crises neste mesmo momento, nesse mundo. Temos a crise de Covid, temos a crise de biodiversidade, temos a crise do clima e muito mais. E temos que trabalhar em conjunto. Temos que trabalhar em conjunto com essa língua que todos nós podemos utilizar para entender um outro, para entender todos os tipos de stakeholders que estão interessados nesses relatórios de sustentabilidade. E com isso podemos trabalhar na ação. Então, realmente é um grande prazer fazer esse lançamento de hoje. Agora temos 12 idiomas que podemos utilizar as normas. Agradeço, Gláucia, mais uma vez. Agradeço o nosso conselho GRI no Brasil. Agradeço a todas as empresas e profissionais de sustentabilidade que estão trabalhando nesse tema e gostaríamos de continuar. Eu só queria saber se o Kuhn já chegou, o embaixador, que já podemos avançar ou esperamos ainda mais alguns minutos.
Just a few more minutes. Sorry about this.
Few more minutes, ok. Então, talvez a gente pode começar com a Valéria, se vai chegar mais tempo, mas chegou mais alguém aqui? Chegou já, ok. Bom, para mim, pessoalmente, é um prazer também fazer a apresentação de hoje e fazer esse painel com os nossos duas anfitriões. A anfitrião global do GRI, que é Holanda. Nós temos a nossa sede da entidade na Holanda desde o início do ano 2000. Fomos criados em 1997 nos Estados Unidos, através de várias pessoas da Fundação Ceres, mas Holanda foi escolhido como país anfitrião do GRI ao nível global. E temos aqui também a Valéria Café, que é do IBGC, o Instituto Brasileiro de Governança Cooperativa, que é nosso anfitrião do escritório GRI no Brasil. Então, é um prazer ter essas duas anfitriões aqui que vão falar sobre a relação deles e a sua visão sobre a questão de transparência dos relatores da sustentabilidade. Para mim, pessoalmente, é um prazer ver que estamos chegando e discutindo esse tema no Brasil. A minha relação com sustentabilidade no Brasil já são 25 anos, ou mais que 25 anos, quando eu fiz a minha tese de mestrado no Brasil sobre a implementação da Convenção de Biodiversidade em 1994. Então, infelizmente, perdemos muito biodiversidade desde então, perdemos muita mata na Amazônia desde então, o que seja voltar para o que a Nelmara falou. Esta deveria ser para nós a década de ação. Temos tido muito tempo para discutir como medir, como pensar, como a gente poderia fazer e como poderíamos cambiar, mas agora é hora de cambiar e de ação. E espero que as normas GRI em português possam ajudar as empresas brasileiras para participar nesse caminho para um desenvolvimento sustentável mais profundo. For the translator, eu vou mudar para o inglês, para apresentar o primeiro panelista de hoje. It's a great pleasure to have the Ambassador Cornelis van Rij, the Dutch ambassador to Brazil, here with us. He was appointed as the ambassador to Brazil in 2018. He brings a very long career with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat since 1982, with many important postings abroad as well as within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. He also had several high-level functions within the European Union and the European Commission, working with the Foreign Affairs Chief as well as with one of the commissioners of the European Commission. He also held a very high office with the Queen and the royal family of the Netherlands. And he is in his 4th posting as ambassador for the Netherlands after Greece, Spain, and Turkey, now in Brazil. I know he has a similar strong passion for flora and fauna and biodiversity in Brazil. He and his wife enjoy that, and I hope that despite the COVID crisis, he's able to enjoy that and go out there into nature. I know myself, the Cerrado around Brasilia, where the embassy is based, is very beautiful. There's many beautiful places to be found. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I share that passion with you. So we are very interested to hear your view as the representative of the Netherlands in Brazil, as the country that hosts GRI globally, where we've been working for over 2 decades. It's a pleasure to have our offices in Amsterdam. And I would also like to mention that the Netherlands and the ambassador was a signatory to a recent letter to the vice president in Brazil, talking about the Amsterdam Declarations Partnership, which is really talking about how can we have deforestation-free commodities as import to the European Union, which is of course extremely relevant to the theme that we're discussing today, and how can businesses talk about their transparency issues, because also, and I'll come back to that later in my talk as well, how the European Union is looking at this at the moment. So Mr. Ambassador Cornelis van Rij, once again, it's a great pleasure having you here, and I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Marco van der Rij. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited and to share some of our thoughts on this very important issue of responsible business conduct, RBC. Indeed, my wife and myself are not able to travel outside the garden and the house where we currently live. We cannot go to see the Cerrado, which I have seen so many times already. So we have to enjoy our little biodiversity in our own garden. But that's inspiring enough, I can tell you. If you have ever been in the Dutch residence, you know that it's a beautiful surrounding, although very small, but still very much reminds us every day of the importance of the subject that we are discussing when it comes to sustainability. I took down some notes here that I will share with you. I would like to make a small introduction and then 5 remarks and a small conclusion. Let me start. So thank you very much, Marco, for the opening and also the team for inviting me. The Netherlands has always been, and you already reminded us, a strong partner of the GRI and the work that you do. We are very glad to be a valued partner and be involved with the important work you do. I'd like to congratulate you also on translating the standards into Portuguese. I hope that that translation will also result in more awareness about the need for RBC, responsible business conduct. My first point, the Netherlands and RBC. Well, the Netherlands sees RBC really as an integral part of its trade policy. There's no sustainable economic growth without responsible business conduct. That's absolutely clear. And to ensure that future generations can enjoy the resources of our planet, we need to make our economic processes more circular and sustainable. This is, I think, now more and more accepted across the board, from left to right, in the political arena in the Netherlands and many other countries as well. You're just reminded us of the important letter that I wrote myself together with 7 other ambassadors belonging to the Amsterdam Declarations partnership to the vice president of this country. In the meantime, we had a conversation with him. I can only say how important it is to also get the support for this approach from important organizations such as yours. So all this is why we encourage companies to adhere to the different guidelines, the RBC guidelines, such as also accepted in the OECD and the United Nations. The Netherlands government has just released a new RBC policy. This policy will focus more on due diligence compliance and providing support to small and medium-sized industries and their RBC challenges. The new policy is a next step in making RBC a cross-cutting issue through all our trade policy-related activities. We want to make sure that companies who invest in the Netherlands follow this policy, but we also hope that and expect that Dutch companies who will want to invest in Brazil stick to those norms. We're also working on the EU level to ensure that there is a coherent and uniform RBC policy throughout the European Union. There's a lot of that, of course, in Brussels, but here locally, obviously, these are issues that I discuss with the EU ambassadors with whom I regularly meet here. The GRI standards align with the Dutch policy as it gives companies an instrument to report on their due diligence. This is my first point. My second point has to do with the need for sustainable supply chains. In the past few years, we've seen a shift within society. Consumers really want to know where their products are coming from and how they are made. They demand companies to step up and show that they have more in mind than just profit making, that they actually take a societal and environmental impact of their production processes into account. There is thus a clear need for sustainable and transparent supply chains where consumers know how sustainable and green their products really are. In the Netherlands, this is not just a niche voice, but it's a sentiment that is shared by a multitude of stakeholders from different areas. Our political parties, consumers, institutional investors are questioning the sustainability of the supply chain of many multinational companies. This is now, as I said earlier, accepted from left to right. Further, to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to make sure that the supply chains are designed in a sustainable and circular manner. And this is exactly an issue that we discussed in this letter by the 8 countries to the government of Brazil just a few days ago. So we are discussing these things with the Brazilian government. How can we create and improve these sustainable supply chains? There is much room for improvement in this regard, but this also allows for many opportunities. With the transition of the GRI standards in Portuguese, Brazilian companies can finally also implement the standards and become more transparent about their efforts to make their supply chain more sustainable. This is an issue that is obviously increasingly getting attention, not only in the discussion on the EU-Mercosur trade treaty, which has not yet been presented to the parliaments, but already there are some heated debates about it, both in Brussels and in many capitals in the EU. But it's also an important issue when it comes to the ambition, in this case of Brazil, to become a full member of the OECD. As you know, this is another process that is ongoing. And the messages are well received here in Brazil. It's a complicated country, as of course all the colleagues and participants from Brazil know. It's a federal state with many layers of decision-making, where responsibilities are sometimes complex, but it's important that we find the room for proper cooperation and mutual assistance in getting in a more, let's say, in a positive, solution-oriented process. My third point would be about trade relations. There is much opportunity for trade between Netherlands and Brazil, but Brazilian companies will only be competitive in Europe in the end if they show that they have done their due diligence. The negotiations on the EU-Mercosur treaty also show more than ever the need for responsible business conduct. A good portion of EU member states want to see a strong RBC guideline within the treaty. Brazil is currently losing out on a lot of economic opportunities because it does not have the comparative advantage in RBC yet. Sustainable and fair products are more attractive to Dutch consumers, and these products can demand a premium. We're in a major shift there. The GRI standards can provide this advantage to Brazilian companies because it can lift their RBC policies and make them more competitive. This is an issue, by the way, that we are also occasionally raising in the meetings that we have with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, which holds all the major Dutch companies, and basically all the Dutch multinational companies are active in this country, some of them already for a very long time. So we raise these issues of responsible business conduct and the relationship and how the shifts is going also increasingly implemented in the Netherlands itself and in Europe, how important it is that they also lead by example. Of course, in a corona crisis, this is not an easy thing because the margins of profit are diminishing. So it is very tough. But I think it's important that we also use this opportunity to see if we can help them to move on in this important challenge and discussion. My fourth point is about transparency as an integral part of RBC. Transparency is the key of all of this. Without openness about what we are doing, we cannot move forward. We need to be honest about how we are producing our goods and services. Transparency allows accountability and creates an environment in which companies can show how they really operate. It enhances the dialogue between companies, consumers, and investors about how we want our world to look like. Further, it's also essential for a healthy, competitive market. Only when companies report adequately about their sustainability practices and efforts can we create a level playing field. The GRI standards are the ultimate tool to create this transparency. It allows companies to report on their RBC due diligence and be certified. This will be a very important step. Of course, also in our dialogue when it comes to issues like the Amsterdam Declarations Partnership, which I very much hope we will now be able to move on. My fifth remark would be about opportunities and challenges. It might not be easy to implement RBC in your company, in the companies. The need for RBC is often not known, and implementing RBC's policies is seen as a very big challenge. And as I already mentioned, in particular in the current crisis, which makes things very difficult. There's often a stigma attached to RBC that it hurts business rather than it helps, that it costs money and does not yield a proper return, that investors and shareholders are not interested in it. However, RBC offers a lot more opportunities than challenges. As I said before, we're in a turning point in our economies where consumers and investors demand more sustainable and green goods and services. Becoming a responsible business is an actual competitive advantage in this day and time. It should not be seen as a hobby that costs money, but sensible business practice. And there is no better time to start becoming a responsible business than today. Even the smallest RBC changes in a private company will be an improvement that can snowball into larger changes. The GRI standards, as we can see, they can guide you in exploring these opportunities and find the perfect RBC fit for you. Then I would like to conclude. This all is why the work of GRI is so important. It allows companies to report on their sustainability and RBC efforts and create better markets. These standards are essential for consumers and investors to make sound decisions. As we have seen in recent times, increasingly large companies, institutional investors, pension funds, large corporations and NGOs are increasingly looking at the quality of the investment also in terms of RBC and sustainability. These things are very much linked to each other. And I have seen, for instance, that in Brazil, there was a coalition of very large Brazilian and foreign companies, together with a number of other societal players, such as NGOs, international and Brazilian NGOs, who are basically supporting the line that we have presented to the Vice President of Brazil and the government of Brazil in this Amsterdam Declarations Partnership letter. We were very astonished that so quickly there was a support for that. And that gives a bit of hope also that there is, including, of course, with the institutional investors from abroad, pension funds, etc., as already mentioned, that also their shareholders and stakeholders are increasingly looking at the quality of the investment. I would like to conclude here that my country, the Netherlands, is very keen to see that these GRI standards are translated into Portuguese. I already mentioned that, because it enables Brazilian companies to gain an advantage on the international market by being more transparent about their RBC efforts. I hope that all the Brazilian companies present, and it's a message that we also transmit to the Dutch companies through the Dutch Chamber of Commerce here, that you will all adapt these standards and work towards a more sustainable future where your business will be thriving. And in that framework, I think there's a great future ahead for even more intense cooperation between Dutch and Brazilian companies and business ventures. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to further cooperation with GRI. Thank you very much, Marco van der Rey. I hand the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for your statements and enlightening us and everyone who's here on the Zoom call about what you have been working on. What I see from 25 years ago until now, we really moved to a different level of engagement around sustainability. It's no longer somewhere a small green group of people that are doing this, but it's really across the board. It's a multi-stakeholder effort, business, investors, NGOs, labor unions, governments, and across the political spectrum, as you say, which is very important. So it's widely carried. So the seriousness of the crisis is recognized, but also the seriousness of what came out of the previous panel is the need for action to move forward fast. I'm very happy to see you subscribe that in relationship to commercial relationship between Brazil and the European Union, the Netherlands and Brazil, on supply chains and on the responsibility of Brazilian companies and Dutch companies alike. So even stronger, it is a comparative advantage, as you say, to be a responsible business, and consumers are more willing to buy your products when you are. So I'm very happy to have your comments. I would like to move now to the second speaker, and then we come back later with questions from the audience to both of you, to Valéria Café, because she has been working in Brazil in the Brazilian Institute for Corporate Governance, which is particularly looking at those responsible business conduct of Brazilian companies and how to help companies to do that, how boards in companies can do that better. And become more responsible. She is, and I get my notes here, the Executive Director of Focalização e Influência, as it's called, at IBGC, where she works on advocacy, research, publications, volunteer commissions, and communications, and a bunch of more things I saw, but I'll stop it here. She's also the founder of IRELGov, Institute of Government Affairs in Brazil, and worked here as a board member. And then she's a professor of ethics and sustainability and reputation and communication for the Escola Superior de Propaganda e Marketing, as well as for the Fundação Getúlio Vargas. She worked as a consultant for a company called Policy Wisdom, and worked extensively in public affairs and corporate communication sustainability with a large number of global companies like Coca-Cola, Whirlpool, JP Morgan, HP, and others in Latin America and Brazil. So she brings the practical experience of working on sustainability in those companies. By training, she's a publicitarian and worked in marketing and as an MBA, and is a member of our GRI board in Brazil. So Valéria, very keen to hear from you to talk about the importance of ESG, sustainability, on how boards of directors of companies address that, so that you can actually downwards into the company get all the sustainability and transparency issues to be discussed, so that you can actually look at those supply chains that the ambassador was talking to and how companies can address that. So the floor is yours, Valéria. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. It was a very pleasure. It's very good, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kees, for hearing you and hearing about supply chain. And also, it's a pleasure to celebrate the GRI standards translated into Portuguese. GRI has been within IBGC since 2011, and we are very proud of that. And also, it's very good to say that the principles of the 5th edition of our Code of Best Practices of Corporate Governance, launched in 2015, already brought the importance of equity, transparency, accountability, and corporate responsibility. At the article of Elaine Cohen and Suraj Srinivasan, published in 2019 by Harvard Business Review, entitled A Guide to Big Ideas and Debates in Corporate Governance, these authors brought some interesting issues that explain the stakeholder capitalism movement. For these authors, for more than 100 years, there are two schools of thought, being one that defends that a company is a legal entity that must prioritize the shareholders' rights, and the other that defends that a company is a real entity that must serve the society as it impacts directly the political, social, and environment rights of the regions where it acts. The authors also mention that this debate today has a new sense of emergency, once companies nowadays support governments to solve local problems. So having said all that, if you don't mind, I have prepared myself to speak into Portuguese, so I'm going to change to Portuguese. So if you, Mr. Rees, if you want to hear, I would like to ask you to hear the translation part. Thank you very much. Outra questão está na característica dos investidores e acionistas, e essa questão mudou consideravelmente com o tempo, inclusive na concentração de propriedade e controle dos votos. Para se ter uma ideia, a publicação Owners of the World, lançada pela OCDE no final de 2019, informa que 41% da capitalização do mercado global é comandada por investidores institucionais. Esse movimento amplificou a voz desses investidores, que ao estudarem o sobe e desce dos papéis das empresas, perceberam que empresas com propósito claro, que agregam valor à sociedade, aplicam as melhores práticas de governança, operando com transparência, equidade, responsabilizando-se pela prestação de contas e pelos impactos causados junto à comunidade e o meio ambiente no qual se comportam de forma mais sustentável no longo prazo. O que a pandemia fez foi elevar a materialidade dos fatores ESG em nosso mundo, que se mostrou totalmente interconectado e interdependente, inclusive porque a falta desses fatores nas organizações tem potencial para destruir o seu valor rapidamente e até mesmo destruir alguns negócios. Estamos vendo exemplos no país e no mundo, com os intensos debates sobre as queimadas na floresta amazônica e no Pantanal e a inclusão racial nas organizações. É preciso que as organizações integrem na governança, na estratégia e na operação as questões sociais, que endereçam a forma como as empresas se relacionam com seus stakeholders e as questões ambientais, reduzindo e até zerando o impacto causado. Inclusive, existe um movimento forte, uma vez que muitas organizações são maiores que muitos países, para que essas empresas impactem positivamente a sociedade e o meio ambiente. É preciso que as empresas sejam agentes de transformação e tomem ações afirmativas, no sentido de causar impactos positivos ao seu redor. E tudo isso precisa ser mensurado de forma transparente e comunicado, para que toda a sociedade enxergue essas ações. As lideranças das organizações, proprietários, conselheiros, diretores, devem endereçar esses direcionadores intangíveis de valor, investindo seu capital em pesquisa e inovação, bem-estar do funcionário, desenvolvimento de talentos, inclusão e mudança de cultura corporativa. Os conselhos devem entender mais profundamente sobre riscos ambientais, sociais, de governança e de gestão de dados em rápida evolução. Falando mais especificamente sobre gestão de riscos e papel de conselhos, é preciso que os conselhos contribuam e colaborem para que os gestores das organizações estabeleçam metas sobre gestão de água, soluções baseadas na natureza, contribuições para uma economia circular. Vale ressaltar o respeito aos direitos humanos, a proteção da saúde, a segurança das pessoas, maior inclusão e diversidade, investimento no combate à desigualdade. As questões de governança incluem clareza sobre o objetivo corporativo, ética, conformidade, anticorrupção, pagamento de impostos, engajamento político. As principais prioridades de gerenciamento de dados para os conselhos são segurança cibernética, uso e governança de inteligência artificial, questões de privacidade de dados, gerenciamento e uso desses dados. Os conselhos aprenderam com a pandemia que é preciso dar suporte à gestão em tempos de crise, colocando as pessoas em primeiro lugar, garantindo que a empresa consiga se manter financeiramente durante a crise. Mais do que isso, aprendemos a ser inovadores e a buscar soluções para a continuidade dos negócios. E vimos nesta pandemia muitos casos interessantes de inovação, ligados diretamente às questões de sustentabilidade, inclusive. Os conselhos também aprenderam que o trabalho em rede traz mais resultados, e a construção de parcerias é fundamental em qualquer momento, principalmente na crise. Falando especificamente em questões estruturais, é preciso que os próprios conselhos de administração avaliem em suas empresas se há um propósito consolidado, se esse propósito serve não somente a seus shareholders, mas a todos os stakeholders, se esse entendimento do propósito se reflete em suas estratégias e atividades, e se nesse planejamento são considerados os riscos e oportunidades de inovação que surgem com o advento das mudanças climáticas, das novas ferramentas tecnológicas e da vontade do funcionário, do cliente e do consumidor em participar dessa construção. Obrigada.
Obrigado, Valéria. Thank you very much for this. Just underlining the importance of how the boards of companies need to be an integral part of the business strategy and of the company, looking at both shareholders and stakeholders. And I think linking it back to the first presentation, it's important to see that it's not only about doing that for yourself. It's actually good business to do that. It's a comparative advantage to be a responsible business and be able to be part of global markets and commercial relationships. So thank you very much. For the audience, I would like to ask if anyone who's interested to ask questions both to Ambassador Van Rij and to Valéria Café, put them please in the Q&A. We had an issue where some questions disappeared, so please check if you put something there already for those two presenters, put it back in. You can also vote in the Q&A box, so the questions that get most votes will appear first. So as soon as I finish my presentation and we go into the question and answers, we can I can see the most voted and most liked questions popping up. I will put my screen on here as I prepared a little presentation to give a general introduction on some issues linked to GRI. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, I hope so. I wanted to start with this image because it reflects both the previous session and this one. We have really come to a different moment in the history the planet, I would like to say, with all those crises, and there's many more. There's even more waves here, like biodiversity, human rights issues around the world, peace and security, workers' rights, etc. David Attenborough, in his most recent movie on his life on the planet, also talks about those crises, and really about which, in my personal view, got me very depressed in the first part of the documentary, and you could see himself getting also more and more depressed. But he really comes with a message at the end, same as Nelmara said in the previous session. This is time for action. There is opportunities. There are opportunities to actually make a change now. If we do it now, we can achieve a lot of results in the next 10 days. Let's use this crisis, COVID crisis, as an opportunity. Let's get ourselves out of the crisis and use these investments that are being made to get a green recovery. So this is a really significant point in history where we have to act together, and therefore today is a great day that we can launch standards in Portuguese and really work much broader in Portugal. And I think, Valéria, with your work in IBGC and all the people present here, there's a big opportunity to grow this, and also with support of our government partners here and the countries that you mentioned, Ambassador, that are part of the principles of Amsterdam on sustainable supply chain. We can really do a lot in the coming time, but there's a strong need to accelerate that. Let's jump back in history, just for also the people present here who don't know the detailed history of GRI. GRI was founded in 1997 by Ellen White, Bob Massey, and I had the privilege to talk to one of the founders earlier this year, Ellen White, and he said, well, we were having a beer in a bar in Chicago, and we said we need to really work on corporate transparency. So it's interesting how a conversation like that in a bar actually resulted in what GRI is today. That the thinking out of the box that happened there led to the foundation of the organization. Of course, they came with a big baggage and history already of working in these teams, but the original idea was founded there based on a lot of environmental disasters that happened in the years before, but also based on 1992 Rio de Janeiro, the first Earth Summit, that actually with its Agenda 21 and the 40 chapters in there already outlined basically what we should be doing. Unfortunately, if we look back, the total amount of CO2 emissions since Rio 92 and before is about the same. So the crisis we have gotten ourselves into as a global community, it was actually already outlined in 1992 what the solutions were, and therefore GRI was created as a result of that, to say, okay, how can businesses be part of this? How can companies be part of this in coming through sustainability reporting, show what they are doing and how they actually be transparent about their impact and then deal with it. Then we went through a whole series of iterations of different types of frameworks: GRI, GRI 2, GRI 3, GRI 4, which came just after Rio +20, and with a constant improvement of the guidelines that GRI was, and then in 2015, with the SDGs that came about, there was a specific target, 12.6, created that looks at corporate transparency and reporting. GRI, together with others, did a lot of efforts there and worked on it to get this into the SDGs. But it is an integral part of the SDGs, and therefore. We work together with the UN agencies, but also with many others to create linkage documents, and we have created them between the GRI standards and the SDGs in order to see how we can push the adoption of the SDGs even more forward. There are specific programs on it. There's the SDG tracker we developed together with UNDP in Colombia, and are trying to implement in a number of other countries. There's a lot of work being done, and then we said, okay, well. We need to change from what we were, which were guidelines, a formal set of standards had to be created. And therefore in 2016, the GRI Sustainability Reporting Standards were officially launched, with also a change in the governance structure of the organization, whereby the standards and the chair of the standards board was in the previous session, Judy Kuszewski, how they can be managed separately, neutral, by a board of global representatives of organizations from our multi-stakeholder group of partners that we have at the global level. They were launched in 2016, and ever since we have been pushing forward and now are updating them, developing new standards, developing a sector program, and very significantly last year we launched the tax standard. This was the first global type of standards that is really asking companies to be transparent about their country-by-country reporting of taxes. There's some work done by the OECD before, but the GRI tax standards makes it very simple and clear for what companies should be reporting on if they want to be transparent about their taxes. We've seen globally that about $600 billion US dollars per year are being avoided, and this could be money that goes to governments in order to implement the necessary infrastructure programs, school program, education programs, health, etc. This year we launched the new waste standard that is incorporating circularity and the circular economy, and we are currently working on, for example, the oil and gas standard, the agriculture and fishing standard, as well as a full update of the set of universal standards with a human rights lens. So there's a lot of works and being done, has been done over the last almost 25 years, and we are currently doing as well in order to continuously update and strengthen the GRI standards. Here you can see the standards. For if you don't know them, they are the universal standards and the topic-specific standards. And I think a key issue that I already mentioned in the introduction is that thereby the standards are a global common language, and a global common language now in 12 different languages, including Portuguese, because different companies would use different words for different for the same topic, and with the GRI standards we really have been able to create a global common language about all those 40-something topics that we have in the topic-specific standards, as well as how the general disclosures of a company should be approached. The GRI standards are freely available. Everyone can download them. You can go to our website and also now download for free the Portuguese standards. And just to remember the multi-stakeholder framework in which we work, in which the GRI standards are being created, in which the oversight of the GRI standards development is being managed, is essential for us, because this gives us on the one hand, the legitimacy at the global level by working with all the different partners, but also to really integrate visions and views of all those different types of stakeholders in the process of standard development. The development of a standard usually takes about 18 months to 2 years. And I always like to say that is very fast for building an international consensus. I've worked many years in the United Nations system, and if you compare to finding consensus within 2 years' time, that's very fast. So we're proud of that as an organization, that we're able to bring this consensus together, maybe also built on sort of the consensus building nature of Dutch politics and what we've worked here in the Netherlands, really trying to have that conversation and bring all the different partners together in a conversation. As an organization, we are global. We have our headquarters in Amsterdam, as I mentioned, and here you can see we really have regional hubs and country desks around the world. And we really try to work with partners all over the world. we really also see that the downloads of the GRI standards over the last 2 years, last year and this year, has an incredible growth, and particularly in Asia and in Latin America. So we see a growing global interest in the standards and use of the standards, and thereby we try to achieve impact. And the impact is that we estimate, because we don't have the full number, because not everyone reports back to us. So anyone who will start using the standards, please report back to us if you do prepare a report based on the GRI standards. About 10,000 companies, 75% of the largest 250 companies. We have worked on policy issues either with governments or regulators in 67 different countries, and achieved 168 of those policies that reference or require make GRI standards mandatory. For example, in the Philippines last year, the SEC in the Philippines mandated the GRI standards, and we see this year already 200 companies coming in and reporting according to the GRI standards. I talked about the downloads, and we work with more than 100 training partners worldwide. As we are a small organization ourselves, we really, for us, working with others across the globe is essential. We cannot do this alone, and none of the work on sustainable development can be done alone. So working with different partners all over the world, like IBGC in Brazil, is essential for us. Here you have a quick peek over where policies have been implemented or adopted by regulators or governments around the world. As you can see in Brazil, both at the stock exchange level and market regulators, as well as the governmental level policies about reporting exist. Just to remind you one more time of the importance of the SDGs and our linkage to that. At the bottom corner here, you can see we have developed the linkage documents between the standards and the SDGs. These are also freely available and downloadable, and we're working on new alignment documents with the SDGs together with the United Nations Global Compact and other UN and partners, as well as trying to engage other standard setters like CDP, etc., to see how we can have a sort of a common language around linking up corporate transparency to the SDGs. This will be launched somewhere in the spring, a European spring of next year, and we hope to let you know about that when this event will take place. The last point I would like to come back to, what the ambassador also already talked about, is what is happening in Europe and with the European Green Deal. This is really a transformational agenda of the European Commission, very ambitious, and the COVID crisis did not necessarily have a negative effect on it. On the contrary, it showed the importance of investing green out of the crisis, and the original funding estimated for the European Green Deal, European money as well as business money and other investors, was about 1 trillion. This is now brought up to 2 trillion. And as you can see in this slide, it's really touching upon agriculture, on buildings, on climate issues, sustainable transport, circular economy, and more, but also focusing on the element of a just transition. This is a very ambitious program. If I look back in my career, working in an NGO in Brazil in the 90s, the language that is being talked about by the European Union and the European Commission now was language we would see more in the NGO world at the time. Now we can see that this is fully adopted across the political spectrum. Of course, there are parties that are not necessarily willing to go all the way with this. So there's a lot of conversations that are still taking place at the European level. But I think very importantly for the global commercial relationships and also emphasized by the ambassador in the new policy of the Netherlands on responsible business. Responsible business, transparency, sustainability are becoming key elements of any business in order to be a player in the global market. And the GRI report and the GRI standards can help businesses to really look at themselves and focus on what they are doing and how that can be transformed. Just to underline here, it is really carried at the highest level, both by the President of the European Commission and the Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans from the Netherlands, the emphasis on the Green Deal and how that will transform the European economy, how Europe there way also will stick to and be even more ambitious, even since some discussions in the Commission as well as in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago, to get a 60% reduction by 2030 of greenhouse gas emissions within Europe, and that is going to be an integral part of the global conversation that Europe also wants to have. Underlining all of that, Europe is looking at the directive on non-financial reporting. And non-financial reporting in this case already talks about GRI and looks at what kind of standards are most probably going to be mandatory for all European businesses of 250 personnel and more. That is what is expected. Discussions are taking place now. An open consultation process was done in the first half of this year. Here you see the cover page of the document that GRI submitted to the European Union. And out of the conversations and out of the open consultation, it became clear that the GRI was by far the most used and most recommended standards so far at the European level. So we are very open and engaged with the European Union to see that we can move this agenda forward, because this is really the mission of the organization, to get mandatory transparency and reporting regulations at the European level that then will be trickling down in all the European countries, as well as in all the global trade relationships of the European Union. So I first had a slide which was not very optimistic. At the end, I wanted to finish with this one. It is a lot of work that has been done over the last 25-30 years in this field. It is a great pleasure that we now have the standards in Portuguese, and we can work much more with all the partners in Brazil and other Portuguese-speaking countries around the world to work on helping you with your GRI reports. We have a colleague, Glaucia, who's been at the forefront for this for the last 13 years. We work together with IBGC. We have training partners, and it will be a pleasure to work with all of you much more in Brazil towards a more sustainable future. So I want to stop my presentation here and go back to the Q&A and open the floor for a conversation with the other panel members. And a first question here is, and please put in more questions. It says, é necessário standard para desenvolver o capital social que tenha evidente influência sobre todas as métricas para melhoramentos e o mundo. This basically refers to a social standard, or a standard about social capital. And if you look at the GRI standards, of course, we talk about environment, social, and economic standards under the GRI. I would like to first maybe give the floor back to you, Mr. Ambassador, to see is this area of work an integral part of the new guidelines of the Dutch government on responsible business conduct, and how, besides environmental issues, also social issues included. Yeah,
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thanks very much. I think I refer to due diligence compliance in this area. In particular, I would say also on the environmental aspects. That would get quite some emphasis. Now, this is a complicated issue. I mentioned already that you have to find a certain balance also in achieving a level playing field in this. This is going to be difficult. So it's a policy that encourages, that stimulates, that tries to work with target groups, also trying to focus on peer reviews and stimulating the economic actors in these important areas. Now, I would say that the approach that we are supporting, obviously, we would like to see this, and you already mentioned that as well, to be included also in the Green Deal discussion in European Union. We see that there is momentum for the responsible business conduct and to establish a more sustainable supply chains discussion, to gaining some momentum in the EU for an approach along these lines. But to find unity in a European approach will, of course, take some time, because it's these issues are looked at differently in different countries. We look at those things in the Netherlands differently than in some other countries. Obviously, we have the organizations such as the Amsterdam Declarations Partnership, I already mentioned that. There are other groups, obviously, but there are still also differences within Europe. I don't have to mention the difference between East and West Europe. East Europe having very often, let's say, very ancient industries that are still in a very complex conversion and change. So to find a level playing field on this will be time consuming, and aligning the EU ambitions with those of the Netherlands will require an additional and very active effort. So this we're working on. So I cannot give a very clear answer to the question at this stage, but it's clear that with the enhanced RBC policy that's been adopted by the Dutch government, moving from entirely voluntary to, let's say, a little bit more obligatory as well, we are looking for partners in that. We see the link with the Green Deal, and we try obviously also to find partners abroad. And I think Brazil is a tremendously important partner, not only because of the size of its country, but also because of the significance of its role on a planetary level. So many of my efforts would go into convincing partners here in Brazil to find common ground, although it will not always be easy, as I already mentioned, in particular in the COVID crisis. But it's the only way forward. And then maybe it will take time, but it's important that we all move in the same direction. I think I'll stop here. Sorry to be not more precise, because that's difficult at this stage. But it's clear that we try to find also in contact with our partners here in Brazil, in particular the Dutch companies that are active here, and we have quite some, that we try to move increasingly the discussion in that direction. And I see some good responses there as well. I mean, companies that operate in this country, obviously, they want to be accepted internationally as well. They're all big players. These are not small companies. So many of them want to lead by example, and they get, of course, also very often guidelines from their own headquarters. Many of the companies that are big in Europe, green, big, open, transparent, they also will have to have that characteristic and that identity abroad, also in Brazil. So it's part of a large movement, of a maybe not always very fast movement, but definitely more going into one direction, and based much more on a type of consensus that we haven't seen in the past, where I think you correctly mentioned this was a niche thing or something of a smaller group. Now we see a very large support for it. But it's going to be a long and winding road, as somebody said.
Thank you. I think, Valeria, maybe I ask you the same question because I think from the board perspective, not only looking at the environmental issues, but also at the social issues, that to build social capital within the companies is important. Do you have a reflection on that?
I think that it's important to say that companies realized now with the pandemic that we had, that they have to take care of people as well as they have to take care of the money and the production. So this is very important to say that companies started to realize that people are really the most important capital they have, as well as not only their employees, but also the consumers, the customers. And as we had this health issue, they started to realize that they have to make that people make the difference and that they have to work with them. And it's possible to make it better. And as we have these social movements everywhere in the world, and especially in Brazil, we also have now many organizations that are gathering together to pressure the companies to make these movements. And so they have to be fast and they have to be quick to make these movements. And they will see that it's good, because when you have diversity, when you have cooperation, you have better results. So it's a start that will not end and will not come back. So people are important and companies are aware of that and are changing.
Thanks, Valeria. Just to mention to the audience, please keep on putting your questions in here and vote for them so we can see the right questions. I will answer, there was a question on language. This of Portuguese is also usable on all the other Portuguese speaking languages. I think we try to make an effort to make the Portuguese translation as usable possible for all different Portuguese speaking countries. I live myself in Brazil, Mozambique, and I learned my Portuguese from a Portuguese professor at the University of Amsterdam. I'm very much aware of all the intricacies of the Portuguese language and the way it's being used in multiple countries. I think as an outsider who enjoys speaking Portuguese, we really try to make an effort to make the translation as usable and user-friendly as possible for all the different Lusophone countries in the world. And of course, there will always be local words that are relevant and more relevant in one place, but we try to do the best as we can. There is a question here on, and maybe for you, Valeria, apart from language, what other aspects do we address to make GRI part of everyday life of a company? And I think this is interesting. The same point from a board perspective, to see what do you do after you have a GRI report? Because it's not only about a one-time report, but it's about how do you build transparency over time? How do you increase your transparency? How do you deal with the impacts, negatives and positive, that you've realized? And I think your experience in working in multiple companies as well at the university to talk about this, what could be your reflection about it? How does a company integrate working with GRI standards within a company afterwards?
Yeah. I was, yes. Well, it's very interesting because the GRI standards, they're very easy. They are not difficult. And once they are in the strategy of the company, everybody is engaged with that and have the GRI culture. It will be easy for everyone to implement it. And it's a good way for you to manage how your company is impacting the society in many ways, in social way, environmental way, in many aspects. And in how, so it's important that the company not only make the annual report, because sometimes the companies use the GRI just to make the annual report and they forget about that. And then they come back the other year to make it again. And that's not how they should work. They should implement the GRI. I mean, make the GRI, understand which are their needs, which are what they have to improve, make the materiality, understand how the stakeholders think about them, and then try to make the change in order that next year, when they will do the exercise again, they will see how they have improved from the previous year. So it's easy, it's just to put in the strategy and put in the play and own way.
Okay, thanks. Well, I can answer that in the webinar series that GRI has been organizing over the last few months called Mão na Massa. There was a presentation also from Eletrobras, for example, about how they as a company have fully integrated the GRI thinking in their assessment and how they on an annual basis track indicators across all the different sub companies, as well as having 1,000 data points across the company to actually do this. So it is an intricate work, and it takes time, and therefore it's not necessarily easy. And the first report will not be necessarily the best report you probably would want to have as a company, but it gives you the first step forward and helps you think through what is the multi-stakeholder process that you are sitting in as a company, and how can you use that to actually improve your business. There's a whole series of questions here that are much more focused at sort of like specific GRI questions. I'll keep them for now. I want to mention that every Friday afternoon, Glaucia is doing introduction workshops online for any new reporter to go into detail through the standards and can help you through. So please be in touch with her if you want to know more about the details. I'm trying to see other questions here. And that is probably
Marco, tem uma pergunta sobre como compatibilizar o interesse do board com a necessidade de tornar a corporação sustentável.
I didn't see that, but that's for Valéria.
It's interesting because it's a good question, because boards now are interested, and they have always been interested at the long term, at the longevity of the company, at the sustainability of the company. And the company can only be sustainable if it has governance, it's organized, if it's transparent, if the community where it belongs is happy with the company, if the community where it belongs grows. So, I mean, when you have all of these thoughts, it's very similar. Nowadays, companies see that when you think about social and environment and governance, is no longer expensive. It's less risk. It brings innovation, and it makes the company be more sustainable and more. It takes the company will take longer, won't die. So that's the idea. Now it's not that should I be sustainable or should I have good results? No, if you are sustainable, you will have good results and you will live longer.
Yeah, I think that fits also with what you said, Mr. Ambassador, on that it's a comparative advantage to be more sustainable. Maybe you want to say a few more words on that. And also there's a question on ESG and ratings of ESG by many investors. They develop their own systems. Are there any linkages built in from the new government policy to these ESG ratings? And do you work with different market parties and investors in the Netherlands, or pension funds for that matter, to look at how can ESG ratings be used to and be shaped through the new policy?
Yeah. No, thanks for that question. I'm not sure whether I can be that specific at this stage. The policy is, let's say, the reinforced corporate responsible business behavior is relatively new, and I'm not sure at this moment. So I don't want to give a wrong answer here on how exactly the matrix will be looked at. But obviously, I can see there is a certain linkage there, but I cannot be very precise at this stage. I'm sorry. That will come probably in the coming period. I only received the information on the new legislation or the new approach a week ago, and I haven't been able to study it in detail. But it's clear that it's going in that direction. Obviously, we all have to be careful to find first of all, it's the direction in which we go that's important. The speed is a different issue. We go too fast, we may lose many of the stakeholders because their businesses may be affected negatively. So it's very careful to find the right balance here between level playing field, between the overall direction that we all agree on increasingly, but also to survive as a business, in particular in this COVID period. So this is a difficult question at this stage to be very precise about. Mm-hmm. But it's clear that we all see the opportunity. We make the link with the Green Deal. We all seem to be going in the direction, at least in the Netherlands, but I think also a number of other countries, together with our major companies. And the Dutch economy has the advantage that it's extremely present all over the world. Our companies are all over the world. So we have these instruments also in that sense to work and to find cooperation with other countries, also help with the help of our own companies. But these processes do not always go very fast because obviously you have to find all these different balances. But so that's what I can say at this stage. I'm sorry to not be more precise, but it's clear that we are all working there, but the art, also the art of diplomacy, the direction sometimes is much more important than the speed. So you cannot lose anybody. You have to have everybody on board. You try to move, with a certain pace, but you cannot go too fast either if you risk losing others. So you need to be in constant discussions, what I do here with Dutch companies, with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, but also with the Brazilian government. But you have to do it carefully. That's what I would say at this stage. Sorry to not be more precise.
No, I understand your point, and I know the policy was just actually approved. I think it was early last week. So you were talking about something that's very new and fresh, and I'm very glad it's there. And I must admit, I haven't had the time to get through it yet. So I'll hope to have a discussion with you later.
You don't have to feel guilty.
No, I cannot. I'm also guilty. So in that one, but it's, as you say, I think the direction is important, and I think it's a very clear statement, and also linked to what's happening in the EU. Here is a question I think maybe is interesting, also for the Friday afternoon's workshop with Glacio, but maybe you have an idea about that as well, Valéria. Na visão do senhor, qual o principal start para que as empresas iniciem seus processos de relatórios? And then I think is really we see now we have about 400 companies in Brazil. There are of course many more companies. So there's a huge growth that we should be able to look at, including multinationals in Brazil doing their reports, even of their own subsidiaries in Brazil. It would be interesting to look at that. What do you see from your perspective, from a corporate governance perspective, Valéria? Why does a company make that decision to get started, and how can we help them to do it if they haven't gotten there yet?
The first thing is that the board and the CEO and the directors, they must have this culture of, we want to implement ESG in our organization, because it's an exercise, it's a different way of seeing things, it's a different way of doing things. So it's important that they believe that these changes will bring results to the company in long term. So this is the first thing, culture, and they have to believe and they have to lead and make it happen in order for it to happen. Then the other thing is that they should consult their stakeholders and understand which are the issues that the company has, and in order, it's a diagnosis, it's a consultancy that they will do, which we call materiality. And then after that, they will have to come back and make an exercise and to put it in the strategy of the company to see how they will deal with their people, with the marketing, mainly with the production. Now we are talking about circular circular economy. This is something that is happening in Europe for a long time, but in Brazil, it's brand new. And I don't believe that entrepreneurs and the companies know how to deal with that. There is a long, there are so many things to be done in Brazil in order for us to start thinking about circular economy. So it really has to be at their strategy in order for them to make the change. When you have a company that is a startup and they are just beginning, it's easier. But when you have a company that already has many legacies, the company will have to change many things. So it's an exercise. They really want to make this change, but it's worthwhile because it will bring many results in long term.
Thank you, Valéria. Let me answer two quick questions here. There's a question on how is the GRI linked to the integrated reporting. Well, GRI was actually a founding member of the integrated reporting. And the integrated reporting is not necessarily a standard in itself, but works with other standards and tries to bring together both the financial reporting as well as the sustainability reporting. So we partner with them. There are documents available also on how GRI and integrated reporting could be worked together by a company at the same time. I think it links back to the previous session as well, where there was a lot of discussion about many different types of standards. And I highly recommend Judy Kuszewski's recent post on LinkedIn, where she wrote a whole article about how those different, and they called it the alphabet soup, or how those different elements within this reporting framework and standards and ESG indexes, etc., are related. Whereby you can look basically at the data process of ESG reporting, or transparency and sustainability reporting. You have the standards on the one hand, and the standards provide transparency from companies and provide data that is being taken up by others, by journalists, by rating agencies, to look at and use to come with ESG indexes, and then investors are making decisions based on that. So there's a whole process of what happens to the data. The starting point is the transparency issue and responsible business conduct, and showing that through your reporting what you do and providing the data. And then there's a whole series of others that come afterwards. Similar here, the collaboration with SASB and TCFD. We at the global level, we have made some statements recently about how we want to collaborate and see possibilities of linking SASB, looking much more at the financial materiality and the impact of sustainability issues on business, while we look much more at the broad perspective, including also the impact of the company on the planet. We are looking with them together how these standards operate. And there's also alignment documents on TCFD and GRI available on our website. Maybe go back to a question here and go back to both the ambassador.
Marco, tem uma pergunta sobre pequenas e médias.
I'll go there. I want to take this one first, which is in Portuguese. Como avaliam e quais as principais mudanças na governança cooperativa impostas pela pandemia da Covid-19, inclusive quantos aos relatos da sustentabilidade? Maybe some reflection from both of you, because we are in a very different world at this point, in a different moment with the pandemic. How do you see that this can actually be a positive, so the challenge becomes an opportunity with both of this work, both from your perspective, Mr. Ambassador, in working, for example, in Brazil with the government. Is it actually something that you can see as an argument to come out much better and greener out of the crisis, or is it actually having a negative effect? And to you, Valéria, then secondly, afterwards, really within companies and boards, do you see that the crisis is actually so profound that the need for transparency is decreasing, or the need for sustainability is decreasing, or is it the opposite actually? So maybe, Mr. Ambassador, you go first, and then Valéria.
This is a very complex question, because obviously each country, including Brazil or the Netherlands or any other country, has to deal with the COVID crisis with the means it has, and obviously the approach sometimes is different. Also, it's complex because within Brazil you see also, because it's a federal state, that responsibilities are organized in a different way than in a more centralized state such as the Netherlands. I see that, for instance, the governors of the states here have a big responsibility, that the federal government has a responsibility. So this is complex. I cannot give a very clear answer to this question, but I can only underline what I am doing here, and that some of my, let's say, like-minded countries' colleagues are doing here. That is to also use this crisis to continue with the very important debate about the sustainability agenda, with the problems of deforestation, and with the future of our business relations, basically the relations between our very, let's say, clear economic structures that exist already for so long. This puts Brazil before some important challenges, but also the European countries, how this will work out. And I cannot give a clear direction at this stage. What I do think is that we have to use this difficult period in Europe, where we're going through very important reforms. You already mentioned also the Green Deal and the big conversion of our energy-based economy to a different model, in particular also in this difficult period. We see also a debate in Brazil, maybe less about that, but also about reforms. When I talked to the Minister of Finance, and I saw him not so long ago, Paulo Guedes, he seemed to be very, very motivated to continue with the necessary reforms to open up and take away some of the protectionist features of the Brazilian economy, which is extremely important. To do that, of course, in combination with also a more sustainable approach is a very, very tall order. Obviously, it's not easy. But definitely that's what we try to stimulate. Use the reforms, use the crisis also to put those issues on the agenda. And we have to see where that will go. Obviously, in Brazil, the discussion is also about people who have great difficulties, who are losing their jobs. There's a huge, let's say, informal sector in this country. People are receiving very small sort of aid, state aid. This is very important that they can survive. But obviously, in such a situation, I can understand that the let's say the green agenda is maybe not as much as close as it would be in a discussion in the Netherlands, which has a different. We don't have this informal sector problem, not in the same way that I have it here. So people are vulnerable. Many people in Brazil are vulnerable. So the government tries to do whatever it can to protect those people who are vulnerable, to see what balance you can find in attacking the virus and taking the right measures, but at the same time also allowing people to earn some money. And obviously that discussion in the Netherlands is very different. So it's difficult to compare there. But you can be assured that when I talk to the responsible authorities here, that I try to understand that difficulty, at the same time say, use this opportunity and also move in the direction of this more, let's say, sustainable supply chain approach of your economy, because this is the moment to open that discussion. But at the same time, understand that there are huge challenges here, great difficulties sometimes, and also the complex structure of governance in this country. That's one of the things that I discovered, is that the federal state is not just something that looks nice on paper, but it's also very complicated. Who is responsible for what at what stage? You've lived in Brazil, so you will probably recognize this. And this is one of the issues that, you also have to have some understanding for. And that's what I try to explain also to my authorities back home. You cannot just turn the switch and say, well, this is what you have to do, and then it happens. It's a complex country. That's why I would like to stop.
Thank you. I was talking to a friend in São Paulo last week, and we was talking about those differences. And the city of São Paulo has more inhabitants than the whole of the Netherlands. So the complexity of Brazil is at a very different level. We know that. So 20 million people in city of São Paulo and 17 million people in the Netherlands. So it's a big difference. But thank you for your answer, and I think it's good to understand that. Also from your perspective, you are keeping that conversation going and with at the government to government level with Brazil, and showing what is happening in Europe and how what could actually be beneficial for Brazilian companies in working into the direction of sustainable development, also out of the crisis. Valéria, I'll come back to you with the same question I already started with before.
Well, two movements have happened during the pandemic within. One is about boards. At the beginning, boards got very close to the management, because really, when everything stopped, companies didn't know what to do, how to do. And so all of the board members had to work together with the board, with the management. And it was very, very good, because they started to understand each one's issues and doubts, and companies start to work better. So this is something that started to happen, and board members started to work more on strategy than on monitoring and control. So this was very good, because that's the idea of the board nowadays. The new board is about strategy and support, and less about control and monitor. So some other thing that have changed is that companies, after the 3 months that they stayed, they stopped, they started to think how we're gonna work. And so they had to innovate, or most of them died, but the others had to innovate how we're going to live through that. And we had many innovation. We had many companies that reinvented themselves. And it was very interesting to understand how this movement happened. But more than that, and when we talk about here at GRI, we talk about transparency. So companies had to communicate a lot. They had to communicate with all of their stakeholders. They had to communicate with their suppliers, with their employees, with their communities, with consumers, in order to tell them what they were doing, in order to say how they should behave, in order to say how they were going to work in spite of the pandemics. So it was very interesting, because some things really have grown, which is the communication among each of the stakeholders. And some interesting movement that we saw is that the first, the second, and the third sectors started to work together. So how we are going to work together in order to make this movement? So we saw many coletivos, many people working together, NGOs working together, companies working together in order to support the government. Many would say we need alcohol, we need respirators, we need transport to take all of these things to Amazon, as we have a huge country. So we saw many people helping each other, and all the sectors working together. And what we hope is that this collaboration continues, because, as it was said here, we have many political issues, not only in Brazil, but everywhere in the world. and Brazil, as it is in Latin America, has more instability, but we have to work together in order to show that we keep on growing, we keep on thinking. There are so many people here, and we have to make this country work. that's the idea. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Valeria. I know the ambassador is about to leave, has to go. So I also want then sort of to wrap up this session, and then Glaucia will come in at the end because a whole series of questions can be answered by her, and then she can tell about how to get in touch with her and what other events are still upcoming this week from GRI. So maybe, first of all, thanks to the translator, because we had someone here to translate from English to Portuguese and from Portuguese to English. So I hope that all worked out. Mr. Ambassador and Valeria, I'm really, it was a great pleasure to have both of you here in this session and hear your views and opinions about this. I think it is pretty clear we're all in this together, in this planet. We have to work together from the Netherlands, in Brazil, in Europe, and to the rest of the world, and try to push this agenda forward. I would like to thank both of you for your positions where you are pushing that agenda, and it's very important. Maybe a last statement from the ambassador before you have to go. Thank you from my side, and I hope we can have many follow-up conversations to see how we can collaborate this. And thank you for your support to the launch of the standards here in Portuguese today.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you, Valeria, and also the person who translated, and of course the person who made sure that all the questions came through. Thank you very much. For me, this was also a very useful meeting, very enlightening meeting, useful to make the connection between us. And I really hope we can also cooperate in the future, keep each other well informed about what we're doing. We all have our responsibility in a way. I'm sorry I have to go, but in these days, you know, you go one meeting to the next, and I have to prepare the next one, which is starting in about 20 minutes. So I'm sorry to have to leave. But again, thanks. And anybody who wants to come back to a number of these issues can always approach the embassy, and we will be, of course, willing to and looking forward to exchange our experiences on the long and winding road. But we'll get there.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. Well, that's thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
Okay. Bye.
Valeria, also sort of a closing words for you.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here with Mr. Ambassador, and it was an honor to be here representing IBGC and to be with you. And please count on IBGC and me whenever you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and for all the participants, thank you for being here with us today. I'll give the word back to Glaucia in 1 second, so she can say how to get in touch, how to learn more about GRI in Brazil, and how we can help you and your company work more with the GRI standards, develop the GRI reports, and jointly collaborate towards a much more sustainable future. It takes time. This is pretty clear. I think we've come a long way from where we were 25 years ago, and we need to see that we can accelerate together in this process. If we look at the SDGs, the goals are set for 2030. If we look at climate goals that are being set for 2030 and 2050, and then if we have to take into consideration all the other issues of human rights, circularity, etc., there's a lot of work to be done. But with the GRI standards in Portuguese, we really hope that this is a helpful tool for everyone to use in Brazil. Eu vou terminar em português, então, muito obrigado a todos. Foi um grande prazer estar com vocês hoje. O primeiro painel também foi uma discussão bem profunda e interessante para todos nós. E espero com as normas traduzidas em português, o sonho de muito tempo de você, Glaucia, agora podemos realmente avançar com muita rapidez e muita profundidade na sustentabilidade das empresas e a transparência no Brasil. Nós vemos amanhã um pequeno comercial, tem outros webinars, talvez você conta mais, eu fico aqui, mas foi um prazer participar hoje e ver o resultado de bastante trabalho para onde a gente passou para chegar a esse ponto.